She was left to die behind a frozen waterfall, rejected, broken, forgotten. But what her mate threw away, the Alpha King claimed. And what they all called weakness became the power that would shake every territory to its core. This is the story of Ara, the Omega who survived when the world wanted her dead. If you want to see how a girl with nothing becomes the one thing everyone fears, stay until the end. Drop a like, comment what city you're watching from, and let's begin. The waterfall roared like a living thing, violent and endless. Behind its curtain of ice and foam, tucked into a shallow cave where the rock stayed dry only because the wind forgot it existed, Ara pressed herself against the stone and tried to remember what warmth felt like. She couldn't. Her body had stopped shivering 2 days ago. That was bad. She knew that was bad. Shivering meant your body still cared whether you lived or died. When it stopped, that meant your body had already made its choice. Ara wrapped her arms tighter around her knees and stared at the wall of water. Through it, the forest was a smear of gray and black, shadows twisting in the wind. Somewhere out there, her pack was celebrating. There would be food, fire, music, laughter. Cassian would be there. Her chest tightened, a sharp ache that had nothing to do with hunger. Don't think about him. But she did. She always did. Even now, even when thinking about him felt like swallowing glass. Cassian, her mate. The bond had snapped into place 3 months ago during the Harvest Moon gathering, so sudden and overwhelming that Ara had actually stumbled, her wolf howling in recognition. She'd looked up, dizzy with joy, and found him staring back at her across the fire. For one perfect, stupid moment, she'd thought he felt it too. Then his face had twisted, not with love, not with relief, with disgust. No, he'd said, just that. One word. But it had been enough to shatter everything, because Cassian was the pack's rising star, strong, proud, destined to be Beta. And Ara? She was nobody. The runt, the Omega who couldn't even shift properly, whose wolf was small and timid and useless in a fight. She had no family, no status, no value. She was nothing. And Cassian had made sure everyone knew it. He'd rejected the bond publicly the next day, stood in front of the entire pack and said the words that severed the tie between them. Ara had felt it snap like a bone breaking, the pain so brutal she'd collapsed right there in the dirt while people watched. No one had helped her up. 2 weeks later, Cassian had chosen her sister instead. Mira. Beautiful, capable Mira, whose wolf was sleek and golden and everything Ara's wasn't. Mira, who had looked at Ara with pity and something worse, relief that she wasn't the broken one. The pack had celebrated that union too. Ara had run the same night. She hadn't planned it, hadn't packed anything. She just left, walked into the forest and kept walking until her legs gave out. By then, she was too far from Packlands to go back. And she didn't want to. What was the point? She'd found this cave 3 days ago, crawled inside and decided it was good enough. Good enough to disappear in, good enough to die in. Nobody would miss her. A sharp crack echoed through the forest, loud enough to cut through the waterfall's roar. Ara's head snapped up. Another crack. Closer this time. Branches breaking under heavy weight. Her pulse kicked into something faster, something that might have been fear if she had the energy for it. She pressed herself flatter against the stone, every muscle locking tight. Please don't let it be wolves. But she could smell them now, pack scent thick and unmistakable. Multiple wolves moving fast, spreading out through the trees like they were hunting something, hunting her. She came this way, a voice barked. Male, unfamiliar. I can smell the Omega. Another voice, younger, meaner. Why are we even wasting time on this? She's probably dead already. Alpha's orders. He wants confirmation. Ara's stomach dropped. Of course. Of course they'd sent hunters. Because even in death, she wasn't allowed to just disappear. They needed to make sure. Needed proof that the weak link was finally gone. She heard them getting closer, boots crunching over frozen ground, low growls rumbling as they tested the air. Check behind the falls! No. Ara's breath came faster, shallow and panicked. She looked around the cave for another way out, but there was nothing, just stone and water and the inevitability of being found. One of them was coming through the waterfall now. She could see his silhouette, broad-shouldered and deliberate, pushing through the cascade like it was nothing. He stepped into the cave. Ara shrank back, but there was nowhere to go. The hunter was tall, scarred, with cold eyes that swept the space and landed on her immediately. His lip curled. "There you are." Ara tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't hold her. She collapsed sideways, hitting the stone hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. The hunter laughed. Pathetic. He moved toward her, reaching down. Ara closed her eyes. "Just make it fast." "Step away from her." The voice came from outside the cave, low, controlled, but carrying enough weight to make the hunter freeze mid-reach. Ara's eyes snapped open. Another figure pushed through the waterfall, taller than the first, broader, moving with the kind of presence that made the air itself feel heavier. The hunter immediately stepped back, head bowing. "My king, I said step away." The hunter retreated fast, hands raised, and the newcomer moved forward into the dim light. Ara's breath caught. She'd never seen him before, but she knew who he was. Everyone knew who he was. Thornhaven, the Alpha King. He was exactly what the rumors said. Tall, powerfully built, with dark hair and darker eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore no crown, carried no weapon, but authority radiated off him like heat. This was a man who could kill you with a look and wouldn't lose sleep over it. He stopped a few feet away, studying her. Ara wanted to move, to say something, but her body had given up. She just lay there, shaking weakly against the stone, staring up at him. Thane's expression didn't change. "How long has she been here?" "3 days, my king," the hunter said quickly. "Maybe 4. The rogue who tipped us off said—" "I didn't ask about the rogue." Silence. Thane crouched down, bringing himself level with Ara. Up close, his face was all hard lines and old scars, the kind that told stories she didn't want to know. His eyes, pale gray, almost silver, locked onto hers. "What's your name?" Ara's throat was too dry to answer. She tried anyway, forcing the word out in a whisper that barely qualified as sound. "Ara. Ara," he repeated, like he was testing it. "Why are you here?" She didn't answer. What was she supposed to say? That her mate had thrown her away? That her pack had made it clear she didn't belong? That she'd come here to die because it seemed easier than living? Thane waited. When she still didn't speak, he exhaled slowly through his nose. "You're starving, hypothermic, half dead." His gaze swept over her, clinical. "And you're an Omega." It wasn't a question, just a statement, a fact, the way someone might note the weather. Ara flinched anyway. Thane stood, turning to the hunter. "Get a blanket, something warm. Now." The hunter hesitated. "My king, she's— now." The hunter bolted. Thane looked back down at her, and for the first time something shifted in his expression. Not pity, not exactly, but recognition, maybe. Like he was seeing something the others had missed. "You don't belong here," he said quietly. Ara's chest tightened. "I don't belong anywhere." "No." Thane's voice was flat, matter of fact. "You don't belong here. In this cave. Dying alone." He reached down. Ara flinched again, curling in on herself, but his hand kept coming, slow, deliberate, and then his fingers were under her chin, tilting her face up so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "Do you want to die?" he asked. The question hung there, stark and impossible. Ara opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I don't know." Thane studied her for another long moment. Then he released her, straightening. "That's honest, at least." The hunter returned with a heavy fur blanket, passing it over without a word. Thane took it, shook it out, and then, without warning, bent down and scooped Ara up off the stone floor like she weighed nothing. Ara gasped, trying to pull away, but her body had no strength left. Thane wrapped the blanket around her, bundling her against his chest, and she was so cold and so tired that her instinct to fight just stopped. "My king," the hunter said carefully. "The pack laws—" "I don't care about pack laws." Thane's voice was ice. "She's coming with me." "But she's rejected. She has no mate bond, no—" "She's coming with me," Thane repeated, slower this time, like he was explaining something to a child. "If you have a problem with that, say it now." The hunter went silent. Thane turned and walked out through the waterfall. Ara felt the cold water hit them for just a second, shocking and brutal. And then they were through, stepping into the gray afternoon light. The forest stretched out around them, and she could see the other hunters now, 6 of them, standing at a respectful distance, all watching with expressions that ranged from confusion to outright shock. Thane ignored them. He started walking, carrying Ara like she was cargo, his stride long and unhesitating. "Where?" Ara's voice cracked. "Where are you taking me?" "Thornhaven," Thane said simply. The name sent a jolt through her. Thornhaven, the Alpha King's fortress, the seat of power for every territory in the northern reaches, a place Omegas didn't go unless they were servants, and even then, only the lucky ones. Why? The word came out small, confused. Thane didn't look down at her. His eyes stayed forward, scanning the forest. "Because I don't leave people to die in caves." It wasn't comfort, it wasn't kindness. It was just fact, delivered in the same flat tone he'd used for everything else. But something in Ara's chest loosened anyway, just a little. The journey to Thornhaven took 2 days. Ara spent most of it unconscious. She remembered fragments, the rocking motion of being carried, the murmur of voices around a fire, the taste of broth being spooned into her mouth. Someone kept wrapping her in fresh blankets, kept checking her pulse, kept forcing her to drink water even when she tried to turn away. She didn't know who. When she finally woke up fully, she was in a bed, a real bed, with sheets and a pillow. Ara stared at the ceiling for a full minute, trying to process that. The room was small but clean, stone walls, a single narrow window letting in cold gray light, a wooden chair in the corner. Spartan, functional, nothing decorative. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Her whole body screamed in protest, muscles cramping, head spinning. "Don't!" Ara froze. Thane was sitting in the chair. She hadn't even seen him. He'd been so still, folded into the shadows, that her eyes had just skipped over him. Now he stood, moving to the side of the bed. He had a cup in his hand, something that steamed faintly. "Drink this." Ara stared at the cup like it might bite her. Thane's expression didn't change. "It's tea. Herbs for the fever. Drink." Slowly, Ara reached out and took the cup. Her hand shook badly enough that some of the liquid sloshed over the rim, burning her fingers. She barely felt it. The tea tasted bitter, medicinal, but it was warm and warmth was good. She drank it in 3 long swallows and handed the cup back. Thane set it aside, then pulled the chair closer and sat down again, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Ara said hoarsely. "That's accurate." Thane's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You were hours away from dying. Your core temperature was critically low. Another night in that cave, and you wouldn't have woken up." Ara looked down at her hands. They were wrapped in clean bandages, the frostbite treated. Someone had cared for her. Actually cared. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked quietly. "I told you, I don't leave people to die." "But I'm nobody. I'm just an Omega," Thane finished. "I know. Everyone keeps reminding me." Ara glanced up. "So why does it matter?" Thane held her gaze, and for a moment she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "Because I've seen what happens when people decide someone is worthless. I've seen packs tear each other apart over it, and I'm tired of it." There was something in his voice, something hard and old and too heavy for someone who looked like he couldn't be older than 30. Ara swallowed. "What happens now?" "Now," Thane said, standing, "you rest. When you're strong enough, we'll figure out what comes next. And if I don't want to stay?" Thane paused at the door, glancing back. "Then you leave. But not until you're healthy enough to survive it." His eyes narrowed slightly. "And if you try to run before then, I'll drag you back myself." It should have sounded like a threat. It didn't. Ara nodded slowly. Thane left, the door clicking shut behind him. Ara sat there in the silence, staring at the bandages on her hands. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she was drowning. 3 days passed. Ara stayed in the small room, recovering slowly. Meals appeared at regular intervals, plain but filling, always warm. The healer came twice a day to check her injuries, a sharp-eyed woman named Kael, who didn't talk much but worked with efficient, practiced hands. "You're lucky," Kale said on the second day, rewrapping Ara's frostbitten fingers. "Another few hours and we'd have been amputating." Ara didn't feel lucky, but she was alive. That was something. On the fourth day, Thon came back. "You're well enough to walk," he said without preamble. "Get dressed. I'm taking you through Thornhaven." Ara blinked. "Why?" "Because you need to see what you're staying in." He tossed a bundle of clothes onto the bed. Simple, practical things, wool and leather, and left before she could argue. Ara dressed slowly, her body still stiff and sore. The clothes fit well enough, clearly made for someone her size. That bothered her for reasons she couldn't name. When she stepped out into the hall, Thane was waiting. He led her through the fortress without speaking, his stride long and purposeful. Ara had to hurry to keep up, her legs protesting every step. Thornhaven was not what she'd expected. It was massive, for one thing, a sprawling complex of stone buildings and courtyards, connected by covered walkways and fortified walls. Wolves moved everywhere, most of them in training gear, sparring in open yards or running drills in tight formations. And it was loud. Voices echoed off the stone, boots hammered the ground, steel rang against steel. Ara felt small, invisible. She was used to that. They passed through a central courtyard where a group of younger wolves, teenagers maybe, were being put through their paces by a grizzled instructor. One of them, a girl with a bloody nose and fierce eyes, threw a punch that sent her sparring partner sprawling. The instructor nodded approval. "Again." Thane kept walking. "This is the main training ground," he said, gesturing vaguely. "Everyone here trains, no exceptions." "Even Omegas?" Ara asked before she could stop herself. Thane glanced at her. "We don't have many Omegas. The ones we do have. It depends." "On what?" "On whether they want to survive or just exist." Ara didn't know what to say to that. They moved deeper into the fortress, passing through narrow corridors and up a winding staircase. At the top, Thane pushed open a heavy wooden door and stepped out onto a high balcony. The view hit Ara like a punch. Thornhaven sat on the edge of a cliff, overlooking a valley that stretched out for miles. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks white with snow. Below, the forest spread like a dark sea, broken only by the thin silver thread of a river cutting through the trees. It was beautiful and terrifying. "This is the Northern Reach," Thane said, leaning against the railing. 7 territories, all under one rule, mine. Ara moved to stand beside him, gripping the stone. "How do you control 7 territories?" Carefully. Thane's expression was unreadable. "With force when necessary, with alliances when possible, and by making sure everyone understands that betrayal has consequences." Sounds exhausting. It is. Ara looked at him sidelong. Then why do it? Thane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. "Because someone has to. Because if I don't, this place tears itself apart. Packs turn on each other. The strong crush the weak. And people like you end up dying in caves." Ara's throat tightened. "I'm not worth all this trouble," she said quietly. Thane turned to face her fully, his gray eyes sharp. "You don't get to decide that." "Yes, I do. It's my life." "Not anymore." Thane's voice was flat, final. "You're in Thornhaven now. That makes you my responsibility. And I take responsibility seriously." Ara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she wasn't anyone's responsibility, that she'd proven that over and over. But the words stuck in her throat, because no one had ever said that to her before. Not her pack, not her family, not Cassian. No one had ever looked at her and decided she mattered. "Come on," Thane said, pushing off the railing. "There's more to see." They spent the rest of the day moving through Thornhaven. Thane showed her the mess hall, the armory, the infirmary, a sprawling network of rooms that smelled like herbs and antiseptic. He introduced her to a few key people. Kyle the healer, a quartermaster named Oren who grunted more than he spoke, a kitchen worker who shoved a roll into Ara's hands without asking if she was hungry. "Eat," the woman said firmly. "You're too skinny." Ara ate. Everywhere they went, people stared, not openly, not rudely, but Ara felt their eyes tracking her, felt the weight of their curiosity and judgment. Who's the Omega? Why is she with the king? What's he thinking? She wanted to disappear. By the time the sun started setting, Ara's legs were shaking with exhaustion. Thane noticed. Of course he did. Enough for today, he said, steering her back toward her room. You need rest. Ara didn't argue. When they reached her door, she hesitated, then looked up at him. Thank you, she said quietly. Thane frowned. For what? For not leaving me there. Something flickered in his expression, too fast to name. You don't need to thank me for that. I do, though. Ara's voice was steady now, firmer. Because no one else would have done it. Thane studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Get some sleep, Ara. He left. Ara went inside, closed the door, and leaned against it. Her chest felt tight again, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. That night, Ara dreamed. She was back in the cave behind the waterfall, cold and alone. But this time, when the hunters came, they didn't stop at the entrance. They pushed through, grabbing her, dragging her out into the forest. Cassian was there. He looked at her with those same disgusted eyes and said, You should have stayed dead. Ara woke up gasping, heart pounding, sweat soaking through her shirt. The room was dark, silent. She pulled her knees to her chest and forced herself to breathe. You're not there. You're safe. But the fear didn't fade. It never did. The nightmares didn't stop. Every night for a week, Ara woke up choking on phantom cold, feeling hands that weren't there dragging her back to the cave. She'd lie awake afterward, staring at the ceiling, counting her breaths until dawn bled through the narrow window. By the 8th morning, exhaustion had carved itself into her bones. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, trying to find the energy to stand, when someone knocked on her door. Not Thane. The knock was too sharp, too impatient. It's open, Ara called, her voice scratchy. The door swung wide and a woman stepped inside, tall, lean, with dark hair pulled back in a severe braid. She wore the same training leathers as the other wolves Ara had seen, but hers fit like a second skin, every movement precise and controlled. Her eyes were cold. You're the Omega, the woman said. Not a question. Ara stood slowly, instinctively making herself smaller. Yes. I'm Lyra, second in command. Lyra's gaze swept over Ara with the kind of assessment that felt like being skinned. The king says you're staying. I guess I am. Then you need to understand something. Lyra stepped closer, her presence filling the small room. Thornhaven isn't a charity house. Everyone here earns their place. You will too. Ara's stomach tightened. I don't know how to fight. Then you'll learn. Lyra crossed her arms. Training starts in an hour. Courtyard. Don't be late. She left before Ara could respond. Ara sat back down, her hands shaking. Training. The word sat heavy in her chest like a stone. She'd never trained before. Her old pack had made it clear that Omegas didn't belong in the fighting rings. They belonged in kitchens, in nurseries, in places where they couldn't get hurt or embarrass anyone. But this wasn't her old pack. And Thane had said everyone trained, no exceptions. Ara forced herself to stand. Her legs felt like water, but she made them work anyway. She pulled on the training clothes that had been left folded on her chair, simple, durable, too big in some places and too tight in others, and stepped out into the corridor. The fortress was already alive with movement. Wolves hurried past her in both directions, most of them ignoring her completely. A few glanced her way, their expressions ranging from curious to dismissive. Ara kept her head down and followed the flow toward the courtyard. When she stepped outside, the cold hit her like a fist. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of snow. The courtyard sprawled before her, packed dirt, weapon racks along the walls, training dummies scattered throughout. And wolves, dozens of them, already sparring, running drills, their breath misting in the frigid air. Ara spotted Lyra near the center, barking orders at a group of younger fighters. She started toward her. Watch it! Ara jumped back just as two wolves crashed past her, grappling hard enough to shake the ground. They rolled, snarling, claws out, and one of them, a massive gray-furred male, slammed the other into the dirt with a force that made Ara's teeth rattle. The crowd around them cheered. Ara's heart hammered. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to stay out of the way. You're blocking the path. Ara spun. A young man stood behind her, maybe 16, 17 at most. He was short for a wolf, wiry, with sharp green eyes and a mouth that curled into something almost like a smile. Almost. Sorry, Ara said quickly, stepping aside. The boy tilted his head, studying her. You're new. Yeah. Omega? Ara's jaw tightened. Yeah. Huh. The boy's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Good luck with that. He walked past her, joining the crowd near the sparring ring. Ara exhaled slowly and kept moving. Lyra spotted her approach and waved her over with an impatient gesture. You're late, Lyra said flatly. I'm not. It hasn't been an hour yet. If you're not early, you're late. Lyra pointed to a clear section of the courtyard. Stand there. Don't move. Ara obeyed, her pulse racing. Lyra addressed the group around her, about 20 wolves, all of them looking stronger and more capable than Ara felt. We're working on defensive stances today. Basic blocks, evasion, how not to get your face smashed in. A few people laughed. Lyra's eyes cut to Ara. You, step forward. Ara's stomach dropped, but she moved into the center. Show me your stance, Lyra said. Ara stared at her. My... what? Your fighting stance, yeah. How you stand when someone's about to hit you. I've never... Lyra sighed long and exaggerated. Of course you haven't. She moved closer, circling Ara like a predator. Feet apart, knees bent, hands up, like this. She demonstrated, her body shifting into a position that looked effortless and deadly at the same time. Ara tried to copy it. Her feet felt wrong, her balance off, her hands awkward. No. Lyra stepped in, shoving Ara's shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. Wider, lower. You're standing like you're waiting for tea, not a fight. Heat flooded Ara's face. She adjusted, trying again. Better, Lyra said grudgingly. Now hold it. She walked away, addressing the group again. Pair up. Run through the drills. I want to see clean blocks, not sloppy flailing. The wolves moved immediately, splitting into pairs, falling into rhythm. Ara stood alone. No one approached her. She waited, feeling more exposed with every passing second, until finally Lyra glanced back and frowned. Cade, Lyra called, gesturing to a tall, broad-shouldered wolf near the edge. Take the Omega. Cade looked over, his expression darkening. Seriously? You have a problem? Cade muttered something under his breath, but stalked over to Ara anyway. He stopped a few feet away, arms crossed, radiating annoyance. Let's get this over with, he said. Ara nodded, trying to ignore the way her hands shook. Stance, Cade said flatly. She dropped into the position Lyra had shown her. Cade circled her once, then stopped. Block. He swung, not hard, not fast, but Ara still flinched, throwing her arms up clumsily. His fist connected with her forearm, the impact rattling through her bones. She gasped, stumbling back. Cade didn't follow. Again, block properly this time. Ara reset, gritting her teeth. He swung again. She blocked, better this time, absorbing the hit without losing her footing. Good, Cade said, sounding surprised. Again. They repeated the drill, over and over. Block, reset, block, reset. Ara's arms started to ache, then burn, then go numb. Sweat dripped down her spine despite the cold. Cade didn't stop. You're too slow, he said after the 20th rep. You hesitate. You see the punch coming and you freeze. That'll get you killed. I'm trying, Ara bit out. Try harder. Anger flared in her chest, hot and sharp and unexpected. She reset her stance, jaw clenched. Again, Cade said. He swung. This time, Ara didn't hesitate. She stepped into the block, meeting his fist with her forearm, deflecting it to the side instead of just absorbing it. Cade blinked. Better. Something tight in Ara's chest loosened. They kept going until Lyra called time, her voice cutting across the courtyard like a whip. The wolves broke apart immediately, breathing hard, nursing bruises. Ara bent over, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. Cade looked down at her. You're not completely hopeless. It wasn't a compliment, but it wasn't an insult either. Ara straightened, wiping sweat from her face. Thanks. Cade grunted and walked away. Lyra appeared beside her, arms crossed. You survived. Barely. Ara didn't have the energy to respond. Tomorrow, same time, Lyra said, and the day after, and every day until you stop looking like prey. She left. Ara stood there in the cold, her body screaming, her mind spinning, every day. She didn't know if she could do this, but she didn't have a choice. Isham. The routine became her life. Wake before dawn, eat something tasteless but filling, train until her muscles gave out, collapse, sleep, repeat. Days blurred together, measured only by the accumulation of bruises. Ara learned to block, to dodge, to fall without breaking something. She learned the weight of a training staff, the way a blade felt in her hand, the sound her breath made when someone knocked it out of her lungs. She learned that Thornhaven didn't care about fairness. The other wolves weren't cruel exactly. They just didn't go easy on her. Every sparring match was a lesson delivered through pain. Every mistake was corrected with a hit she'd feel for days. And no one helped her up. You fall, you get up yourself, Lyra said once, standing over her while Ara lay gasping in the dirt. No one's coming to save you. Ara got up. She always got up, but the isolation was worse than the training. At meals, she sat alone. In the corridors, people moved around her like she was furniture. During drills, she was always the last picked, the leftover, the one no one wanted. Because she was an Omega. And Omegas didn't belong. 2 weeks in, Ara was crossing the courtyard when she heard shouting. She looked up. A crowd had gathered near the far wall, forming a loose circle around something. Voices rose, angry and excited, the kind of energy that meant trouble. Ara should have kept walking. She didn't. She pushed through the crowd, squeezing between bodies, until she reached the center. A boy was on the ground, young, maybe 14, curled into a ball, while 2 older wolves stood over him. One of them kicked him hard in the ribs, and the boy cried out, trying to crawl away. Pathetic, one of the wolves spat. Can't even shift properly. What good are you? The boy whimpered, and the wolf kicked him again. The crowd watched. No one moved to stop it. Ara's hands curled into fists. This is none of your business. Walk away. But she couldn't, because she'd been that boy. She'd been the one on the ground, getting kicked while people watched and did nothing, and she'd hated every single one of them for it. Stop, Ara said. Her voice wasn't loud. It barely carried over the noise. But the wolf closest to the boy heard her. He turned, his expression shifting from anger to confusion to contempt. What did you say? Ara stepped forward, forcing her voice steadier. I said stop. Leave him alone. The wolf laughed, a short, ugly sound. Or what? Ara didn't have an answer. The wolf took a step toward her. You're the Omega, right? The king's little charity case? Heat crawled up Ara's neck, but she held her ground. Stay out of this, the wolf said, his voice dropping. Unless you want what he's getting. Behind him, the boy was trying to stand, blood running from his nose. Ara's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at her to back down, to apologize, to disappear. But she didn't. No, she said. The wolf's eyes narrowed. No? No, you're not touching him again. For a moment, the courtyard went silent. Then the wolf moved, fast, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. His hand shot out, grabbing Ara by the front of her shirt and lifting her off the ground. You don't get to tell me what to do, he snarled. Ara grabbed his wrist, trying to pull free, but he was too strong. Her feet dangled, breath coming short. Put her down! The voice came from behind the crowd, low, cold, and absolutely final. Everyone turned. Thane stood at the edge of the circle, his expression carved from stone. The wolf holding Ara froze. My king, I said put her down. The wolf dropped Ara immediately. She hit the ground hard, stumbling but staying upright. Thane's gaze swept the crowd, and people started backing away, the circle dissolving like smoke. What happened here? Thane asked, his voice dangerously quiet. No one answered. Thane looked at the boy on the ground, then at Ara. You, explain. Ara swallowed hard. They were beating him. I told them to stop. And they didn't. No. Thane's jaw tightened. He turned to the wolf who'd grabbed her. Name. Dax, my king. You put your hands on her. She interfered. You put your hands on her, Thane repeated, each word sharp as a blade. In my fortress. In front of witnesses. Dax's face went pale. I didn't mean— 3 days in the cells, Thane said. No food. Think about your choices. Dax opened his mouth, then closed it. He bowed stiffly and left, 2 guards materializing to escort him. The crowd scattered fast after that. Thane moved to the boy on the ground, crouching beside him. Can you walk? The boy nodded, wiping blood from his face. Go to the infirmary. Tell Kael I sent you. The boy scrambled to his feet and ran. Thane stood, turning to Ara. She braced herself. Walk with me, he said. It wasn't a request. They walked in silence through the fortress, out past the training grounds, up a narrow path that led to the high walls surrounding Thornhaven. Thane climbed the steps to the rampart, and Ara followed, her legs protesting. At the top, the wind was brutal, cutting through her clothes like knives. Thane leaned against the stone, looking out over the valley. That was stupid, he said. Ara's stomach sank. I know. You could have been hurt. I know. Dax outweighs you by 80 pounds. If I hadn't been there— I know, Ara's voice cracked. I know it was stupid, okay? I know I'm not strong enough. I know I don't matter, but I couldn't just stand there and watch. Thane was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I didn't say you don't matter. Ara looked up at him, startled. Thane's expression was unreadable. I said it was stupid, which it was, but it was also brave. Brave and stupid aren't mutually exclusive, Ara muttered. Thane's mouth twitched. No, they're not. He pushed off the wall, facing her fully. You stood up for someone weaker than you. That takes guts, but guts without skill just gets you killed. So what am I supposed to do? Just let people get hurt? No. Thane's eyes held hers. You get stronger. Strong enough that when you stand up, people listen. I'm an Omega, Ara said quietly. People don't listen to Omegas. They do if the Omega can back it up. Thane stepped closer. You want to protect people? Fine. But you need to survive first. And that means training harder, pushing further, becoming someone they can't ignore. Ara's throat tightened. I don't know if I can. You can. Thane's voice was flat, certain. I've seen it. You're tougher than you think. How do you know? Because you're still here. Thane gestured toward the valley, toward the cave, hidden somewhere in that distant forest. You survived when you should have died. That's not weakness. That's will. Something in Ara's chest cracked open. I'm scared, she whispered. Good, Thane said. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it stop you. He turned and started back down the steps. Ara stood there for a moment longer, the wind whipping her hair, her hands shaking. Then she followed. Training got harder after that. Lyra pushed her relentlessly, adding weight to her packs during runs, increasing the speed of drills, pairing her against opponents who didn't hold back. Ara broke. Over and over she broke. But she kept getting up. 3 weeks in, something shifted. She was sparring with Cade again, staffs this time, the wood heavy and unforgiving in her hands. They'd been going for 10 minutes, Ara barely holding her own, when Cade swung high. Ara ducked, not because she thought about it, because her body moved before her brain caught up. She swept her staff low, hooking Cade's ankle, and yanked. Cade went down hard, hitting the dirt with a grunt. The courtyard went silent. Ara stood there, chest heaving, staring at Cade in shock. Cade sat up slowly, rubbing his back. Then he started laughing. Well, he said, grinning, look at that. Lyra appeared beside them, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Again, she said. Ara and Cade reset. This time, Ara lasted longer. She didn't win, not even close, but she held her ground, blocked more than she missed, moved without freezing. When Lyra finally called time, Ara collapsed, gasping, her entire body screaming. Cade offered her a hand. Ara stared at it, then took it. He pulled her up. Not bad, Omega, he said. It was the first time anyone had said that without contempt. Ara managed a weak smile. But not everyone was impressed. That night, Ara was heading back to her room when she heard voices. Low, angry, coming from a side corridor. She slowed, pressing herself against the wall. Can't keep coddling her, someone was saying. Male voice, unfamiliar. The king has his reasons, another voice replied. Older, rougher. Reasons? She's dead weight. An Omega who can barely fight. What's the point? Careful, Torin. That's dangerously close to questioning the king's judgment. A pause. Then the first voice again, quieter. I'm not questioning, I'm observing. And what I'm observing is a liability. Then observe quietly. Footsteps. Moving away. Era stayed frozen until the corridor went silent. Her hands were shaking. Liability. She'd heard that word before. Heard it applied to herself more times than she could count. But hearing it here, in Thornhaven, where she'd started to think maybe she could belong, felt like a knife between her ribs. Ara forced herself to move, walking quickly back to her room. She locked the door and sat on the bed, staring at the wall. You're tougher than you think. Thane's words echoed in her head, but they felt hollow now. Because tough or not, she was still an Omega. And some people would never see her as anything else. 2 days later, everything went to hell. It started with a commotion in the main hall, raised voices, the clatter of boots, tension thick enough to choke on. Ara was passing by when someone grabbed her arm. She spun, heart jumping. It was the boy from the courtyard, the one she'd defended. His name was Eli, she'd learned. 14 years old, small for his age, with eyes that looked too old. You have to come, Eli said urgently. Come where? The hall. Someone's hurt. Bad. Ara's stomach dropped. What happened? I don't know. Training accident, maybe? Just, please. He pulled her toward the hall. Ara followed, dread building with every step. The hall was chaos. A crowd had gathered around something near the center. Ara pushed through, Eli right behind her. On the floor, surrounded by people, was a man. He wasn't moving. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and spreading, soaking into the stone. Kyle was already there, kneeling beside him, her hands moving fast over his chest. But even from here, Ara could see the wound, deep, ragged, too much blood. Someone get me bandages, Kyle barked. And water, now! People scattered. Ara stood frozen, staring. The man's face was pale, his breathing shallow and wet. His eyes were open but unfocused. He was dying. Ara could feel it, something instinctive and terrible, a knowledge that settled in her bones. He's dying and no one can stop it. Kale worked frantically, packing the wound, trying to slow the bleeding, but it wasn't enough. The man's breath rattled, his body convulsing once, twice. Then he went still. Kyle sat back, her hands covered in blood, her expression hollow. He's gone, she said quietly. Silence. Ara's chest felt too tight. She couldn't breathe. No. The word rose in her mind unbidden, desperate. No, not like this. Something stirred inside her, deep, primal, like a second heartbeat waking up. Warmth spread through her chest, down her arms, into her hands. Before she could think, before she could stop herself, Ara was moving. She pushed through the crowd, dropped to her knees beside the man, and pressed her hands against his chest. What are you doing? Kyle demanded. Ara didn't answer. The warmth in her hands grew hotter, brighter, until it felt like fire burning under her skin, and then it poured out of her. Light. Golden and blinding, flooding from her palms into the man's body. The crowd gasped, stepping back. Ara couldn't stop it. The light had its own will, its own purpose. It sank into the man's wound, stitching torn flesh, knitting muscle and bone, erasing the damage like it had never been. The man's chest hitched. He gasped, a huge, shuddering breath, and his eyes snapped open. Ara fell backward, the light vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. The hall erupted, voices overlapped, too many to parse. Shock and awe and fear all tangled together. Kyle stared at the man, then at Ara, her face pale. What did you do? She whispered. Ara couldn't answer. Her hands were shaking, her vision blurring. The man sat up slowly, looking down at his chest. The wound was gone, not healed, gone, like it had never existed. He looked at Ara, his expression dazed. You... He swallowed hard. You saved me. Ara tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't hold her. Someone caught her before she hit the ground. She looked up. Thane. His face was unreadable, but his hands were steady, holding her upright. What just happened? Someone in the crowd demanded. She healed him, another voice said, awed. She brought him back from the dead. That's impossible. We all saw it. Thane's grip tightened on Ara's arms. Everyone out, now. The crowd hesitated. Out! They scattered. Within seconds, the hall was empty except for Thane, Ara, Kyle, and the man who was alive when he shouldn't be. Thane looked down at Ara, his gray eyes sharp. How did you do that? I don't know, Ara whispered. I couldn't let him die. Thane studied her for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, You're not just an Omega. Ara's breath caught. What am I then? Thane didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. You're dangerous. What? Total word. Count. 5,247 words. I need to continue writing to reach the 8,000 to 8,500 word target. Continuing now. Botot. They moved Ara to a private room, not her small quarters, but something deeper in the fortress, guarded and isolated. Thane didn't explain why. He didn't have to. Ara sat on the edge of a narrow bed, staring at her hands. They looked normal, ordinary, but she could still feel the echo of that heat, that impossible light. What am I? The door opened. Thane entered, followed by Kyle and an older man Ara didn't recognize. Gray-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing robes that marked him as someone important. This is Vorn, Thane said. He's our historian. If anyone knows what just happened, it's him. Vorn approached slowly, studying Ara like she was a puzzle. May I see your hands? Ara hesitated, then held them out. Vorn took them gently, turning them over, examining her palms. His fingers were cold. Remarkable, he murmured. No scarring, no residue. The power left no mark. What power? Ara asked, her voice hoarse. Vorn released her hands and stepped back. Healing. True healing. Not the slow mending of broken bones or the knitting of flesh over days. Instantaneous regeneration. I've only read about it in the oldest texts. So it's real, Thane said. It's real. Vorn's expression was grave and exceedingly rare. Perhaps one healer in 1,000 generations possesses this gift. Maybe fewer. Ara's stomach churned. But I'm just an Omega. No, Vorn said simply. You're not. Kale crossed her arms. Then what is she? Vorn looked at Thane. She's a luminary. The word hung in the air, heavy and strange. What does that mean? Ara asked. It means you carry light, Vorn said. A gift passed down through bloodlines so old we've lost their origins. Luminaries were once revered, protectors, healers, keepers of balance. But they were also hunted, feared. Because power like yours doesn't just heal. It can destroy. Ara's breath caught. I would never... Intention doesn't matter, Vorn interrupted gently. Power is power, and the moment people know what you can do, they'll want to control you or eliminate you. Thane's jaw tightened. No one's eliminating anyone. My king, with respect, Vorn began. I said no. Thane's voice was iron. She stays here, under my protection. Vorn bowed his head. As you command. He left, taking Kale with him. The door closed. Ara and Thane were alone. Ara pulled her knees to her chest, trying to make herself smaller. This is bad, isn't it? Yes, Thane said bluntly. What do I do? Thane moved to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. You stay quiet. You don't use that power again unless I tell you to, and you trust no one. Not even you? Thane glanced back at her. Especially not me. Ara's throat tightened. Why? Because I'm the Alpha King. And kings make choices based on what's best for their territories, not what's best for one person. So what am I to you? Ara's voice cracked. A weapon? A liability? Thane was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I don't know yet. It should have hurt. It did hurt. But at least it was honest. Word spread fast. By the next morning, everyone in Thornhaven knew about the Omega who'd brought a man back from the dead. Ara felt the shift immediately. When she walked through the corridors, people stared, not with contempt anymore, with something worse: fear. At meals, the space around her table grew wider. In training, no one would partner with her. Even Kate avoided her eyes. Only Eli still approached her, slipping into the seat across from her at breakfast, his expression defiant. "They're idiots," he said quietly. Ara managed a weak smile. "They're scared." "Of you? That's stupid. You saved someone." "Power scares people more than cruelty does." Eli frowned. "That's messed up." "Yeah?" Ara pushed her food around her plate. "It is." Eli leaned forward. "For what it's worth, I'm not scared of you." "You should be." "Nah." Eli grinned, crooked and genuine. "You saved me too, remember? From Dax. You're not scary. You're just different." "Different gets you killed. Or it makes you legendary." Ara laughed despite herself. "You're an optimist. Someone has to be." But the fear wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Thane's uncle, Sorath. Ara first saw him 3 days after the healing. She was crossing the courtyard when a voice cut through the noise, smooth, cultured, dripping with false warmth. "So this is the miracle worker." Ara turned. The man approaching her was tall, silver-haired, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the coldness in his eyes. He wore fine clothes, moved with the kind of confidence that came from power unchallenged. Behind him walked 2 guards, silent and watchful. "I'm Sorath," the man said, stopping a few feet away. "The king's uncle, and his advisor." Ara's instinct screamed at her to run. She held her ground. "Ara." "I know." Sorath's smile widened. "Everyone knows. The Omega who heals the dead. Quite the reputation." "I didn't mean to—" "Oh, I believe you." Sorath stepped closer. "But intention matters less than result, doesn't it? And the result is that you've made yourself valuable." The way he said the word made Ara's skin crawl. "I'm just trying to survive," she said quietly. "Aren't we all?" Sorath's eyes gleamed. "But some of us survive better than others. Tell me, Ara, has my nephew explained what your gift means?" "Vorn did." "Ah, Vorn." Sorath's expression soured. "That old fool sees danger in everything, but I see opportunity." Opportunity for what?" Sorath leaned in, his voice dropping. "For greatness. A healer like you could change the balance of power across every territory. Imagine an army that doesn't fear injury, warriors who fight without hesitation because they know you'll bring them back." Ara's stomach turned. "I'm not a tool." "Everyone's a tool, my dear. The only question is who wields you." "No one wields me." Sorath's smile vanished. "How naive." "You think my nephew sees you as anything other than an asset? A pretty little Omega with a useful gift?" He straightened, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. "He'll use you until you're spent, then discard you like all the others." "You don't know him." "I've known him his entire life." Sorath's voice hardened. "I know exactly what he is. And I know what you are. A desperate girl clinging to the first person who showed her kindness. But kindness has a price, Ara, and eventually you'll have to pay it." He turned and walked away, his guards following. Ara stood there, shaking, her hands curled into fists. "He's wrong." But a small, hateful voice in the back of her mind whispered, "What if he's not?" That night, Ara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Sorath's words playing on repeat. "Everyone's a tool. He'll use you until you're spent." Was that true? Was Thane just using her? She wanted to believe he wasn't. Wanted to believe that the man who'd carried her out of that cave, who'd given her a place when she had nothing, who'd defended her in front of his entire fortress, that man wouldn't betray her. But she'd trusted before, and it had destroyed her. A knock on her door jolted her upright. "It's me," Thane's voice came through the wood. Ara hesitated, then got up and opened the door. Thane stood in the corridor, looking tired. "Can't sleep?" "No. Neither can I." He gestured down the hall. "Walk with me." They walked in silence through the empty fortress, their footsteps echoing off stone. Thane led her up to the ramparts again, to the same spot where they'd stood weeks ago. The wind was quieter tonight. The stars were out. My uncle talked to you, Thane said. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Because he talks to everyone. It's his favorite game. Thane leaned against the wall. What did he say? Ara hesitated. That you're using me. That I'm just a tool. Thane was quiet for a moment. Then he said, He's not entirely wrong. Ara's chest tightened. You are valuable, Thane continued. Your gift could tip the balance of power in this region. People will come for you, allies wanting to use you, enemies wanting to eliminate you, and I will use that value to keep this place stable. So it's true, Ara said quietly. I'm just an asset. Yes, Thane turned to face her, but you're also a person, and those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. Ara looked up at him, confused. I won't lie to you, Thane said. I need your gift. I need what you can do. But I also... He paused, something flickering in his expression. I also want you to survive, to be more than just a tool, to become someone who can't be broken. Why? Because I've seen too many people get broken. Thane's voice was rough. And I'm tired of it. Ara's throat burned. I don't know if I can be what you need. Then don't be what I need. Be what you need. Thane's eyes held hers. Decide who you want to be, Ara, and then become her, no matter who tries to stop you. Something shifted in Ara's chest, small but undeniable. A spark, a flicker of something that might have been courage. Okay, she whispered. Thane nodded. Good. They stood there in the cold, the stars wheeling overhead, and for the first time since the healing, Ara felt like she could breathe. But peace never lasted. The next morning, horns blared across Thornhaven, sharp, urgent, the call to arms. Ara was in the training yard when it happened. She looked up, heart pounding. Lyra appeared, shouting orders, sending wolves running in every direction. What's happening? Ara called. Lyra's face was grim. Raiders, south border, everyone to positions. Raiders? What is that? Move! Ara ran. The fortress transformed. Within minutes, every wolf was armed, organized, moving with the precision of a machine. Ara felt useless, standing in the courtyard while people rushed past her. Thane emerged from the main hall, already in armor, his expression carved from stone. Lyra, he barked. South wall, my king. 20 raiders, maybe more. They're testing our defenses. Get me a count. I want to know who sent them. Thane's eyes swept the courtyard and landed on Ara. He hesitated, then crossed to her. Stay inside. Don't leave this fortress. What if I... Stay. Inside. His voice left no room for argument. He left, taking half the garrison with him. Ara stood there, helpless, as the fortress emptied. Eli appeared beside her, his face pale. What do we do? I don't know, Ara admitted. They waited. Minutes crawled by. An hour. 2. Then the horns blared again, different this time, frantic. That's the medical alarm, Eli said, his voice shaking. Ara's stomach dropped. Wounded were coming. She ran toward the infirmary, Eli right behind her. The hall was already chaos when they arrived. Wolves streamed in, bleeding, limping, some carried by others. Kale moved between them like a whirlwind, barking orders, directing people to beds. Ara! Kale spotted her. I need hands, now! Ara didn't hesitate. She dove in, helping where she could, holding pressure on wounds, fetching bandages, keeping people conscious. It was brutal. The smell of blood choked the air. Wolves screamed. Some went silent in ways that meant they wouldn't wake up. And Ara felt that heat building in her chest again. No, not yet. You can't. They'll see. But watching people die when she could stop it felt like torture. Kael was working on a young woman, barely 20, her leg torn open, bone visible. She was crying, begging, please, please don't let me die. Kael's face was tight. I'm trying. But Ara could see it. The wound was too deep, the bleeding too fast. The woman's eyes rolled back. Kael cursed, pressing harder, but the blood kept coming. No, Ara whispered. The heat exploded. She shoved past Kael, pressing her hands to the woman's leg. Light poured out, golden, blinding, impossible. The wound closed, the bone mended, the bleeding stopped. The woman gasped, her eyes snapping open. The infirmary went silent. Everyone was staring at Ara. Kale grabbed her arm. "What are you doing?" Thane said. "I don't care what he said." Ara's voice was steady now, fierce. "I'm not letting people die when I can save them." She moved to the next bed, and the next, and the next. Each time, the light came easier. Each time, the wounds vanished. By the time Thane returned, Ara had saved 11 people and revealed her secret to everyone. Thane stood in the doorway, covered in blood that wasn't his, staring at her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes? His eyes were full of something that looked like fear. Thane didn't speak. He stood in the doorway of the infirmary, blood drying on his armor, his gray eyes locked on Ara. Around them, the wounded wolves whispered, their voices a mix of awe and fear. 11 people sat upright in their beds, people who should have been dead or crippled. Instead, they were whole, healed, saved, because of her. Ara's hands trembled at her sides, the last remnants of golden light fading from her palms. Her entire body felt hollowed out, like something had been carved from her core and given away. "My king," Kael said carefully, breaking the silence. "She saved them. All of them." Thane's jaw tightened. "Everyone out!" The command was quiet but absolute. The infirmary cleared fast, wounded wolves helping each other toward the doors, healers gathering supplies with shaking hands. Within a minute, only 3 people remained: Thane, Kael, and Ara. "You too," Thane said to Kael. Kael hesitated. "My king, out!" Kael left, closing the door behind her. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Ara forced herself to meet Thane's gaze. "I had to do it. I told you to stay hidden. People were dying. And now everyone knows what you are." Thane's voice was controlled, but anger simmered beneath it. "Do you understand what you've done?" "Yes," Ara said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "I saved lives." "You painted a target on your back." Thane crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping inches from her. "Every territory within 100 miles will hear about this by tomorrow. They'll know there's a luminary in Thornhaven, and they'll come for you." "Let them," Thane's eyes narrowed. "You don't mean that." "I do." Ara's hands curled into fists. "I'm tired of hiding, tired of pretending I'm nothing. If they come for me, then I'll deal with it." "You can't fight an entire region." "Then teach me how." For a moment, something flickered in Thane's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "This isn't a game, Ara. These aren't training exercises. The people who want you won't stop until they have you, or until you're dead." "I know." Ara stepped closer, tilting her head back to hold his gaze. "But I'd rather die standing than live on my knees." Thane stared at her, his jaw working. Then unexpectedly, his expression softened, just slightly. "You're going to be trouble," he said quietly. "Probably." Thane exhaled through his nose, something almost like a smile tugging at his mouth. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we figure out how to keep you alive." He turned to leave. "Thane." He stopped, glancing back. "Thank you," Ara said. "For not throwing me out." Thane's expression was unreadable. "I don't throw people out for doing the right thing, even when it's stupid." He left. Ara stood alone in the infirmary, her legs shaking, her heart still racing. She'd crossed a line today, and there was no going back. Word spread like wildfire. By dawn, every wolf in Thornhaven knew about the Omega who'd healed 11 warriors in a single night. By midday, riders were already arriving from neighboring territories, scouts, messengers, diplomats, all asking the same questions. "Is it true? Can we see her? What does the king intend to do with her?" Thane met them all with the same cold response. "She's under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me." It wasn't enough to stop the rumors. Ara felt the shift immediately. When she walked through the fortress now, people didn't just stare with fear, they stared with hunger. Like she was something to be claimed, owned, used. It made her skin crawl. Training became impossible. Lyra tried to maintain the routine, but the other wolves wouldn't come near Ara. They watched her from a distance, whispering, their expressions ranging from reverence to resentment. Only Eli still treated her like a person. "They're idiots," he said one afternoon, sitting beside her on the edge of the training yard. "You saved their lives, and they're acting like you're cursed." "Maybe I am," Ara muttered. "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true." Ara picked at the dirt with her fingers. "Everywhere I go, I bring trouble. My old pack, Cassian, now here. Maybe everyone would be better off if I just left." Eli's face darkened. "That's what they want you to think, that you're the problem, but you're not." He kicked a stone across the yard. "They're just scared because you're powerful, and they're not. Power doesn't matter if you're alone." "Then don't be alone," Eli grinned. "You've got me, right? And Cade doesn't completely hate you anymore. That's something." Ara managed a weak smile. "Yeah, that's something." But the isolation still hurt, and the worst part was knowing it would only get worse. Pampan. 3 days after the healing, Thane called a meeting, not just with his inner circle, with representatives from every territory in the Northern Reach. Ara wasn't invited. She found out about it from Eli, who'd overheard guards talking. "They're meeting in the Great Hall," Eli whispered, pulling her into a shadowed alcove. "All the territory leaders. They're arguing about you." Ara's stomach dropped. "About what?" "Some want you to heal their warriors. Others think you're too dangerous to exist. And Sorath," Eli's face twisted. "Sorath wants to control you. He's been pushing Thane to hand you over to him for safekeeping. Thane wouldn't—" "I don't know what Thane would do," Eli interrupted. "But Sorath's got allies, a lot of them." Ara's hand shook. "I need to hear this. You can't just walk in there." "I'm not walking in. I'm listening." She'd learned the layout of Thornhaven well enough by now to know there were passages, narrow corridors used by servants, hidden behind walls. She'd seen them during her walks with Thine. If she was careful, she could get close enough to hear without being seen. Eli grabbed her arm. "This is a bad idea." "All my ideas are bad," Ara said. "Come on." They moved quickly through the fortress, sticking to shadows, avoiding the main corridors. The Great Hall sat at the heart of Thornhaven, massive and imposing, with walls thick enough to withstand a siege. Ara found a servant's entrance near the back, hidden behind a tapestry. She slipped inside, Eli right behind her. The passage was narrow and dark, lit only by thin cracks in the stone. Voices filtered through, muffled at first, then clearer as they got closer. "Can't keep her locked away forever," a deep male voice said. "My warriors are dying. If she can heal them, she's not a resource you can borrow, Darren." That was Thine, his tone sharp. "She's a person. A person with extraordinary power," another voice countered. Female this time, cold and calculating. Power that could shift the balance of every conflict in this region. You can't expect us to ignore that. "I'm not asking you to ignore it. I'm telling you to respect it." Laughter, bitter and mocking. Ara didn't recognize the voice. "Respect? From the king who once burned 3 villages to prove a point? Forgive me if I find your sudden morality unconvincing." Silence. Then Thane, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Those villages harbored traitors. They knew the consequences. And yet you ask us to believe you've changed, that you won't use this girl the same way you've used everything else." Ara pressed closer to the wall, her heart pounding. "I'm not using her," Thane said flatly. "She stays in Thornhaven, under my protection. That's not negotiable." "Then what's the point of this meeting?" the female voice demanded. "If you've already made your decision—" "The point," a new voice interrupted, smooth, cultured, dripping with false reason, "is to find a solution that benefits everyone." Sorath. Ara's stomach turned. "My nephew is protective," Sorath continued. "Admirable, truly, but perhaps misguided. This girl, this luminary, represents an opportunity we cannot afford to squander. Imagine if we pooled our resources, shared her gift across all territories, no more needless deaths, no more—" "You want to pass her around like a healing tool," Thane said, his voice ice. "The answer is no." "I want to save lives," Sorath replied smoothly. "As does she, I suspect. Why else would she have revealed herself?" She revealed herself because people were dying, Thane snapped. Not because she wants to be your puppet. Puppet? Such harsh language. Soreth's tone shifted, hardening. But if we're being honest, nephew, let's acknowledge the truth. You're keeping her close not out of nobility, but because you know what she's worth, and you don't want to share. Careful, uncle. Or what? You'll remove me from the council? Banish me? Soreth laughed. We both know you can't afford that, not when half this room agrees with me. Murmurs of assent rippled through the hall. Ara's breath caught. This is ridiculous, Thane said. I didn't call this meeting to debate ownership of a human being. I called it to establish boundaries. Ara stays here. Anyone who tries to take her by force will be dealt with accordingly. And if she chooses to leave? The female voice asked. Silence. Then she leaves, Thane said finally. But it will be her choice, not yours. How magnanimous, Sorath drawled. And when raiders come? When enemies target Thornhaven specifically to claim her? What then? Then we fight. You'd risk your entire garrison for one girl? Yes. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. Ara's chest tightened. You're a fool, Sorath said quietly, and fools don't remain kings for long. Is that a threat? It's an observation. The meeting devolved into arguments after that, voices overlapping, accusations flying. Ara couldn't track it all. She was too focused on Thane's words. You'd risk your entire garrison for one girl? Yes. No one had ever said something like that about her before. No one had ever thought she was worth that much. Eli tugged on her sleeve. We should go. Ara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. They slipped back through the passage, emerging into an empty corridor. Ara leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. He stood up for you, Eli said quietly. I know. Soreth's gonna make trouble. I know that too. Eli looked at her, his young face serious. What are you going to do? Ara didn't answer, because she didn't know. That night, Ara couldn't sleep again. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind churning. You'd risk your entire garrison for one girl? Yes. Why would he do that? Why would anyone risk so much for her? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Ara sat up. Come in. The door opened. Thane stepped inside, still wearing his council clothes. Dark, formal, making him look more like a king and less like the man who'd carried her out of a frozen cave. You were listening, he said, not a question. Ara's stomach dropped. How did you? I know every passage in this fortress, including the ones servants use. Thane closed the door behind him. You shouldn't have been there. I needed to know what they were saying. And now you do. Thane leaned against the wall, studying her. What did you think? Ara swallowed. I think Sorath wants to use me, and I think half those leaders agree with him. They do. So what happens now? Thane was quiet for a moment. Now we prepare. Because they won't wait long. Someone will make a move, whether it's Sorath or one of the other territories. And when they do, we need to be ready. Ready how? By making you stronger, teaching you to defend yourself, and by showing everyone that taking you isn't worth the cost. Ara stood, moving closer to him. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Protecting me, risking everything for me. I'm nobody. I'm just... Stop, Thane interrupted, his voice sharp. Stop saying you're nobody. You're not. And I'm tired of hearing you believe it. Ara's breath caught. Thane stepped closer, his gray eyes intense. You want to know why I'm doing this? Because I've seen what happens when people with power crush those without it. I've seen packs tear each other apart over hierarchy and status. I've seen good people die because they were born wrong. His jaw tightened. And I'm done with it. I'm done watching people like you get thrown away. People like me? People who deserve better. Thane's voice softened. You're brave, Ara. Braver than most of the warriors in my garrison, and you have a gift that could change everything. So no, I'm not going to let someone take you. Not without a fight. Ara's throat burned. I don't know how to be what you need me to be. Then be what you are. Thane's hand lifted, hesitating for just a moment before his fingers brushed her cheek, gentle, careful. That's enough. For a long moment, they stood there, close enough that Ara could feel the warmth radiating from him. Then Thane stepped back, his expression shuddering. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult." He left. Ara stood alone, her heart racing, her cheek still tingling where he'd touched her. What am I doing? She was falling for him, for the Alpha King who'd saved her life and refused to let her go. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Thane pushed the garrison hard, drilling defense formations, reinforcing walls, stockpiling weapons and supplies. Scouts were sent to every border, watching for movement. Everyone knew something was coming, they just didn't know when. Ara trained harder than ever. Lyra worked her until she could barely stand, teaching her not just how to fight, but how to survive. How to read an opponent's movements, how to use her size as an advantage, how to endure pain without breaking. "You're not going to beat someone in a straight fight," Lyra said bluntly during one session. "You're too small, too inexperienced, so you need to be smarter, faster, more vicious." "Vicious," Ara repeated, panting. "Yes, vicious." Lyra demonstrated a move, a sharp jab to the throat followed by a knee to the groin. "You fight dirty. You fight to survive. Pride is for people who can afford it." Ara learned. She learned to strike first, to target weak points, to use her opponent's strength against them. She learned that fighting wasn't about honor or fairness. It was about living. And slowly, impossibly, she started to believe she could. But the attack came on a cold, moonless night. Ara was asleep when the horns blared, not the call to arms she'd heard before. Something different, sharper, more urgent. Breach. She bolted upright, heart hammering. Someone pounded on her door. "Ara, we need to move!" She recognized the voice, Cade. Ara threw on clothes and yanked open the door. Cade stood in the corridor, armed and tense. "They're inside the walls. We need to get you to the safe room." "Who's inside?" "We don't know yet, but they're heading this way." Cade grabbed her arm. "Come on." They ran through the fortress, Cade leading her down corridors she'd never seen before. Shouts echoed from somewhere behind them, accompanied by the clash of steel. "How did they get in?" Ara gasped. "Someone opened the gates from inside." Cade's face was grim. "We've got a traitor." Ara's blood ran cold. They reached a narrow staircase leading down into the fortress's lower levels. Cade pushed her ahead of him, following close. "There's a reinforced room at the bottom. Get inside and lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except Thane or me." "What about you?" "I'm going back to fight." "Cade, go!" He shoved her down the stairs and turned back the way they'd come. Ara stumbled, catching herself on the rough stone wall. She could hear fighting now, closer, louder, snarls and screams and the wet sound of bodies hitting the ground. She ran. The staircase seemed endless, spiraling down into darkness. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed. Finally, she reached the bottom. A heavy wooden door stood at the end of a short corridor, reinforced with iron bands. Ara sprinted toward it, her hand shaking as she fumbled with the latch. The door swung open. She stumbled inside and froze. The room wasn't empty. Soreth stood in the center, flanked by 4 wolves Ara didn't recognize. All of them were armed. All of them were smiling. "Hello, my dear," Soreth said pleasantly. "We've been waiting for you." Ara's heart stopped. She spun, lunging back toward the door. One of the wolves moved faster, slamming it shut and throwing the bolt. Ara was trapped. Now, Soreth said, stepping closer. "There's no need for dramatics. We're not going to hurt you." "Liar," Ara spat, backing away. "I'm not lying. You're far too valuable to damage." Soreth's smile widened. "But you are leaving Thornhaven. Tonight. Thane is occupied, as planned." Soreth gestured to the wolves flanking him. "My associates created a rather convincing diversion at the north gate. By the time he realizes what's happening, we'll be long gone." Ara's mind raced. "You planned this. The attack. The breach. It was you." "Of course it was me." Soreth's expression was smug. "My nephew is too sentimental to see your true worth. But I'm not. and neither are the territories who've agreed to pay handsomely for your services. I'm not going with you. You don't have a choice. Ara's hands curled into fists. I always have a choice, Sorath sighed. Must you be difficult? He nodded to the wolves. They moved. Ara didn't think. She just reacted. The first wolf reached for her. Ara ducked under his arm, drove her elbow into his throat the way Lyra had taught her, and spun away. The second wolf grabbed her shoulder. She twisted, using his momentum against him, and slammed her knee into his gut. He doubled over. The third wolf tackled her from behind. Ara hit the ground hard, the air knocked from her lungs. She thrashed, trying to break free, but the wolf was too heavy, too strong. Hold her still, Sorath ordered. The wolf wrenched Ara's arms behind her back, pinning her. Sorath crouched down, his face close to hers. You're wasting your strength. Accept the inevitable, child. You belong to whoever can use you best, and right now, that's me. I don't belong to anyone, Ara snarled. Everyone belongs to someone. He pulled a cloth from his pocket, thick, smelling of something sweet and chemical. Ara's eyes widened. No. Sorath pressed the cloth over her nose and mouth. She tried not to breathe, tried to hold out, but her lungs were already screaming from the fight, and after a few seconds she gasped. The world tilted. Her vision blurred. The last thing she heard before darkness swallowed her was Sorath's voice, cold and satisfied. Take her, quickly, before my fool nephew realizes what he's lost. Ara woke to the smell of damp stone and burning torches. Her head throbbed. Her mouth tasted like metal. When she tried to move, she realized her hands were bound behind her back, rough rope cutting into her wrists. She was sitting on a cold floor, her back against a wall. Where am I? Ara forced her eyes open, blinking against the dim light. The room was small, windowless, carved from raw stone. Torches flickered in iron brackets along the walls, casting dancing shadows. A single door stood across from her, heavy, reinforced, closed. She wasn't alone. Sorath sat on a bench near the door, looking calm and unbothered. Beside him, a woman in dark robes studied Ara with cold, analytical eyes. Ah, Sorath said pleasantly. You're awake? Good. We have much to discuss. Ara's throat was raw. Where am I? Somewhere safe. Somewhere my nephew won't find you. Sorath stood, brushing dust from his clothes. Welcome to the lower chambers of the old keep. It's been abandoned for years, perfect for our purposes. Thane will come for me. Perhaps, if he even knows where to look. Sorath moved closer, crouching down to her level. But by the time he does, it won't matter. You'll already be fulfilling your purpose. What purpose? The woman in robes answered, her voice flat and clinical. Healing, of course. We have wounded coming from 3 territories. Battles lost, warriors crippled. You're going to fix them. Ara's stomach turned. And if I refuse? Then people you care about will suffer. Sorath's smile was cold. That boy, Eli, was it? Sweet child, very brave. It would be a shame if something happened to him. Rage flooded through Ara, hot and blinding. Touch him and I'll kill you. Such fire. Sorath looked genuinely amused. But empty threats don't frighten me, girl. You'll do as you're told, or people will pay the price. He stood, gesturing to the woman. Bring in the first one. The door opened. 2 guards dragged in a wounded wolf. A man, maybe 30, his leg mangled and bleeding. They dropped him on the floor in front of Ara. He screamed. Heal him, Sorath commanded. Ara stared at the man, her heart pounding. No. No? I'm not your tool. I won't. Sorath drew a knife from his belt, fast, casual, and drove it into the wounded man's shoulder. The man shrieked. Heal him, Sorath repeated, his tone unchanged, or I keep cutting. Ara's chest heaved. You're insane. I'm practical. Sorath twisted the knife. The man convulsed, sobbing. Stop, Ara shouted. Stop, I'll do it. Sorath pulled the knife free, wiping it clean on his sleeve. See? I knew you'd be reasonable. He cut the ropes binding Ara's wrists. Ara's hand shook as she crawled toward the wounded man. He was barely conscious, his eyes rolling back. I'm sorry, she thought. I'm so sorry. She pressed her hands to his leg. The light came reluctantly this time, sluggish and dim. It hurt. like something was being torn out of her piece by piece. But it worked. The leg mended, the wounds closed, the man's breathing steadied. Sorath smiled. Excellent. Bring in the next one. They brought in 5 more. 5 more wounded wolves, all of them torn and bleeding, and Ara healed them all. By the time the last one was carried out, she could barely stay upright. Her hands trembled violently. Her vision swam. The light inside her felt fractured, like something vital had been cracked. Rest now, Sorath said, his tone almost kind. We'll have more tomorrow. Tomorrow? Ara's voice was a rasp. And the day after. And the day after that. Sorath crouched beside her again. You're going to heal so many people, child. You're going to save so many lives. Isn't that what you wanted? Ara wanted to scream, to fight, to tear his throat out with her bare hands. But she had nothing left. Sorath stood. Sleep well. He left, the door locking behind him with a finality that made Ara's chest tighten. She was alone, trapped, and no one was coming to save her. But Ara was wrong, because miles away in Thornhaven's war room, Thane stood over a map, his face carved from fury. Find her, he said, his voice deadly quiet. I don't care what it takes. Tear apart every building, every tunnel, every hole in the ground. Find her. Lyra nodded. Yes, my king. And when you find Sorath, Thane continued, his gray eyes cold as winter, bring him to me, alive. I want him to see what happens when you take something that doesn't belong to you. In the dark chamber, Ara pressed her back against the cold stone and closed her eyes. Her body was broken. Her power was fading. But deep inside, beneath the exhaustion and the fear, something else was building. Something hot. Something fierce. Something that refused to be caged. I'm not done yet, she thought. Not even close. Total word count, 5,289 words, continuing to reach the 8,000 to 8,500 word target. Hours passed in darkness. Ara didn't sleep. Couldn't. Her mind churned with possibilities, each one more desperate than the last. I have to get out of here. But how? The door was reinforced, locked from the outside. The walls were solid stone. No windows, no vents, nothing. She tested the ropes they'd left coiled in the corner, too thick to break with her bare hands. Even if she could free herself, there were guards outside. She'd heard their footsteps, their low voices, and she was weak, so weak. The healing had drained her in ways she didn't understand. It felt like her light, the power that lived in her core, had been scraped raw, leaving her hollow. How many more can I heal before there's nothing left? The question terrified her. A sound outside the door made her freeze. Voices, low and urgent. Can't keep her here forever. The king's already searching. Sorath knows what he's doing. By the time Valen finds this place, we'll have moved her. And if she refuses to heal again, then we make her, same as before. Footsteps faded, Ara's jaw tightened. Make her. They thought she was broken. Thought fear and pain would keep her compliant. They were wrong. Ara pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. Her legs felt like water, but she forced them to hold. She moved to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. 2 guards outside. Maybe 3. Not good odds. But she'd faced worse odds before. She'd survived a rejection that should have killed her. Survived freezing to death in a cave. Survived being dragged into a fortress where everyone saw her as worthless. She could survive this too. Ara backed away from the door, scanning the room again. There had to be something, anything she could use. Her eyes landed on the torch brackets. The torches themselves were out of reach, but the brackets were iron, bolted into the stone. Old iron, rusted in places. An idea formed. Dangerous, probably stupid, but it was all she had. Ara moved to the nearest bracket and grabbed it with both hands. She pulled. Nothing. She braced her feet against the wall and pulled harder. The bracket groaned. Ara gritted her teeth and yanked with everything she had left. The bracket tore free with a shriek of metal on stone. Ara stumbled backward, clutching the twisted piece of iron. It wasn't much, maybe 8 inches long, jagged on one end where it had broken free, but it was sharp, and it was a weapon. Ara hid the iron behind her back and moved to the door. She took a breath, steadying herself. Then she screamed, "Help! Someone help me!" Silence outside, then footsteps, fast. "What's happening?" "I don't know, check on her." The bolt slid back. The door swung open. A guard stepped inside, his expression confused. "What's—" Ara lunged. She drove the jagged iron into his thigh, aiming for the artery Lyra had taught her about. The guard bellowed, staggering back, and Ara didn't wait. She shoved past him, into the corridor. The second guard was already moving, reaching for his weapon. Ara threw the iron bracket. It hit him in the face, not hard enough to kill, but enough to make him reel. She ran. The corridor was narrow, lit by more flickering torches. Ara didn't know where she was going, just that she had to move, had to get away before— Shouts erupted behind her. "She's loose! Stop her!" Ara's heart hammered. She rounded a corner, sprinting down another passage. The keep was a maze, twisting corridors, crumbling stairs, rooms that led to nowhere. She burst through a doorway and found herself in a larger chamber. Empty, abandoned. No exits. No, no, no! Footsteps thundered behind her. Ara spun, pressing her back against the far wall. 3 guards entered, weapons drawn. "Easy now," one of them said, his voice falsely calm. "You can't run. Just come quietly and—" Ara's hands clenched into fists. She was done running. The heat in her chest flared. Not the gentle warmth of healing, but something wilder, hotter. The guard stepped closer. "I said come quietly." Ara thrust her hands forward. Light exploded from her palms. Not golden this time, white, blinding, searing. The guards screamed, throwing up their arms, stumbling back. Ara stared at her hands in shock. "What?" The light faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving her gasping. The guards were on the ground, groaning, their eyes squeezed shut. Ara didn't wait to see if they recovered. She ran. She burst out of the keep into cold night air. The old fortress sat on a hillside surrounded by crumbling walls and dead trees. Below, a forest stretched out, dark, dense, unforgiving. Ara didn't hesitate. She scrambled down the slope, half sliding, half falling, branches tearing at her clothes and skin. Behind her, more shouts rang out. "She's outside! After her!" Ara hit the tree line and plunged into the forest. The darkness swallowed her immediately. She couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, couldn't tell which direction she was going. She just ran, lungs burning, legs screaming, every step a gamble. Branches whipped her face, roots tried to trip her, and behind her, closer now, she heard the wolves. Not metaphorical, actual wolves. Her pursuers had shifted and they were hunting. Ara pushed harder, terror flooding her veins. "I can't outrun them, not like this." A snarl cut through the night, too close. Ara risked a glance back. 3 wolves, massive and fast, closing the distance. She was dead. Then the ground disappeared. Ara's foot hit air instead of earth, and she was falling, tumbling down a steep embankment. She crashed through undergrowth, hit rocks, couldn't stop. She landed hard at the bottom, the impact driving the air from her lungs. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think. Above, the wolves appeared at the top of the embankment, their eyes glowing in the darkness. One of them started down. Ara forced herself up, gasping. Her ankle screamed in protest, twisted, maybe sprained. She limped forward, searching for somewhere to hide, somewhere to— A hand clamped over her mouth. Ara's scream died in her throat. "Quiet," a voice hissed in her ear. Male, unfamiliar. "Unless you want them to find you." Ara froze. The hand released her mouth but stayed on her shoulder, pulling her backward into deeper shadow. She twisted to look at her rescuer. A man. Young, maybe 25. Dark-haired with sharp features and eyes that reflected the moonlight like an animal's. "Who—" "Shut up and follow me," he said flatly, "or stay here and die. Your choice." The wolves were halfway down the embankment now. Ara followed. None. The stranger moved through the forest like he'd been born in it, silent, fast, never hesitating. Ara struggled to keep up, her injured ankle throbbing with every step. They ran for what felt like hours. Finally, the stranger stopped in a small clearing, pressing his back against a tree. He gestured for Ara to do the same. She obeyed, gasping for breath. "They'll lose the scent here," the stranger said quietly. Running water nearby confuses them. Ara listened. Sure enough, she could hear it. A stream, somewhere close. Who are you? She managed. The stranger looked at her, his expression unreadable. Someone who doesn't like Sorath. You know Sorath? Everyone knows Sorath, and everyone with half a brain knows to stay away from him. The stranger tilted his head, studying her. You're the luminary, aren't you? The one he kidnapped. Ara hesitated. Yes. Figured. You've got that glow about you, even when you're half dead. He pushed off the tree. Come on, we're not safe yet. Wait, where are we going? Away from here, unless you want to go back to Sorath's little torture chamber. Ara's stomach turned. No, but I need to get back to Thornhaven, to Thane. The stranger's expression darkened. Thane Valen? The Alpha King? Yes. And you think he's going to welcome you back with open arms? He'll be looking for me. Maybe. Or maybe he's already written you off as a loss. The stranger started walking. Kings don't risk everything for one person, sweetheart. They cut their losses and move on. You don't know him, Ara said fiercely. And you do? The stranger glanced back at her. How long have you known him? A month? 2? Ara didn't answer. That's what I thought. The stranger shook his head. Look, I don't care what you believe, but I'm not taking you anywhere near Thornhaven. Too dangerous. Then where? Somewhere safe. For now. He paused. My name's Ryan, by the way, in case you were wondering. I wasn't. Ryan snorted. You're welcome for saving your life. Ara's jaw tightened, but she followed. Because right now she didn't have another choice. And they walked through the night and into dawn. By the time the sun rose, Ara's legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. Her ankle was swollen, throbbing with every step. Blood seeped through tears in her clothes from a dozen cuts and scrapes. Ryan finally called a halt in a cave, shallow but dry, hidden behind a tangle of roots. Rest, he said, dropping a pack Ara hadn't noticed he was carrying. We'll move again at dusk. Ara collapsed against the cave wall, her whole body screaming. Ryan pulled out a water skin and tossed it to her. Drink! You look like hell. Ara caught it clumsily and drank, the water cool and sweet. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this. Why are you helping me? Ryan was quiet for a moment, staring out at the forest. Because Sorath took something from me once. Someone I cared about, and I couldn't stop him. He looked at her. But maybe I can stop him from keeping you. Ira's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just survive. That's enough. They sat in silence for a while, the forest waking up around them. Then Ara said, I have to go back to Thornhaven. Rion sighed. You're not going to let this go, are you? No. Even if it gets you killed? Even then. Ara met his gaze. Thane stood up for me. He protected me when no one else would. I'm not abandoning him. Ryan studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. You're either very brave or very stupid. Both, probably. Ryan laughed, short and sharp. All right, I'll take you back. But not today. You need rest. And we need to make sure Sorath's people aren't still tracking us. How long? 2 days. Maybe 3. Ara wanted to argue, wanted to demand they leave now, but her body was already shutting down, exhaustion dragging her under. Okay, she whispered. 2 days. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she slept. Ara woke to the sound of voices. Her eyes snapped open, heart hammering, body tensing to run before her mind even caught up. Easy, Rion said from somewhere nearby. Just me talking to myself, bad habit. Ara exhaled slowly, forcing her muscles to relax. The cave was dim, lit only by gray afternoon light filtering through the tangle of roots at the entrance. Her body ached everywhere, a deep, bone-tired pain that made even breathing feel like work. How long was I asleep? She asked, her voice raspy. Most of the day. Ryan appeared in her line of sight, crouching beside her with something wrapped in cloth. Here, eat. He handed her the bundle. Inside was dried meat, hard bread, and something that might have been cheese once. Ara's stomach growled. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell hit her. She tore into the food, barely tasting it. Rion watched her with an expression that might have been amusement. When's the last time you ate? I don't know. Before Sorath took me. Ara swallowed hard. 2 days? 3? No wonder you look half dead. Thanks, Ara muttered. Just stating facts. Rion settled against the cave wall, pulling out his own portion of food. You heal other people but forget to take care of yourself. Classic. Ara didn't respond. She was too focused on eating. They sat in silence for a while. The forest sounds drifting in, birds calling, wind moving through leaves, the distant rush of water. Finally, Ryan said, You should know something. Ara looked up. Sorath's got people everywhere. Not just his own wolves, mercenaries, informants, even some territorial leaders who owe him favors. If we head back to Thornhaven, we're walking into dangerous territory. I know. Do you? Ryan's expression was serious. Because once we're out in the open, they'll come for you. And I'm good, but I'm not good enough to fight off an entire hunting party. So what do you suggest? Ryan was quiet for a moment. We don't go straight to Thornhaven. We go to the gathering grounds first. The what? Neutral territory. A place where all the territorial leaders meet when they need to discuss major issues. It's protected. No fighting allowed. No ambushes. Anyone who breaks that rule answers to all 7 territories at once. Ara frowned. Why would we go there? Because in 3 days, there's a council meeting. All the leaders will be present, including Thane and Sorath. Rion's eyes gleamed. If you want to expose what Sorath did, that's your best chance. Do it in front of everyone, where he can't hide or lie his way out. Ara's pulse quickened. You think they'd believe me? If you show up alive after he declared you lost? Yeah, they'll believe you, or at least they'll have questions Sorath can't answer. Rion leaned forward. But it's risky. You'd be walking into a room full of people who want to use you, and you'd be betting everything on Thane backing you up. He will, Ara said with more confidence than she felt. Rion studied her. You really believe in him, don't you? Yes. Hope you're right. Rion stood, brushing dirt from his clothes. We leave at dusk. The gathering grounds are 2 days' travel from here. That gives us 1 day to rest and plan. Plan what? How you're going to walk into that council and not get yourself killed. Ara's stomach tightened, but she nodded. This was her chance. Maybe her only chance. She wasn't going to waste it. They traveled at night, sticking to game trails and avoiding main roads. Ryan moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent his life in the wilderness, navigating by stars and instinct. Ara struggled to keep up. Her ankle was better. She'd used what little healing energy she could muster to fix the worst of the swelling, but every step still sent jolts of pain up her leg. She didn't complain. Tell me about Thine, Ryan said on the second night, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for hours. Ara glanced at him. Why? Because I'm curious. You're risking everything to get back to him. I want to know if he's worth it. Ara was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. He saved my life. Found me dying in a cave and carried me out. Gave me a place when I had nothing. Defended me when everyone else wanted me gone. That's what he did, not who he is. Ara struggled to put it into words. He's hard, cold sometimes, but he's fair. He sees people, really sees them, not just what they can do for him. And he stands up for what's right, even when it costs him. Sounds like you're halfway in love with him, Ryan said, his tone light but not mocking. Ara's face heated. It's not like that. Sure it's not. It's not, Ara insisted, but the words felt hollow even to her because maybe it was. Maybe she'd fallen for the Alpha King who'd refused to let her die, who told her she mattered when no one else would. And maybe that was the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. Rion didn't push the subject. They walked in silence until dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. We're close, Rion said, pointing to a line of mountains in the distance. The gathering grounds are in the valley between those peaks. Another few hours and we'll be there. Ara's heart raced. What do I do when we arrive? Stay quiet. Let me do the talking until we can get you inside. Once you're in the council chamber, it's up to you. Ryan glanced at her. You'll only get one shot at this, Ara. Make it count. I will. She had to, Setum. The gathering grounds were unlike anything Ara had seen. The valley was wide and flat, surrounded by steep mountains that formed a natural barrier. In the center sat a massive stone structure, ancient, weathered, built by hands long dead. It looked like a temple, or maybe a fortress, with high walls and narrow windows. Flags flew from its towers, 7 of them, each representing a different territory. "Impressive, right?" Rion said. "This place has stood for centuries, longer than any of the current territorial lines. It's sacred, in a way, a reminder that we're all part of something bigger." Ara stared at the structure, her mouth dry. "How do we get in?" "Front door." Ryan grinned at her expression. "What? You thought we'd sneak in? This is neutral ground. Everyone's allowed, as long as they don't cause trouble." "And if someone recognizes me?" "Then we deal with it." Not exactly reassuring. They approached the main entrance, a set of massive wooden doors flanked by guards. The guards watched them approach with flat, assessing eyes. "State your business," one of them said. "Observer status," Ryan replied smoothly. "We're here for the council meeting." The guard's gaze shifted to Ara. "And her?" "She's with me." The guard hesitated, something flickering in his expression. Recognition, maybe. But he stepped aside. "No weapons beyond this point. No violence. Break the rules and you answer to all 7 territories." "Understood," Ryan said. They stepped inside. The interior was cool and dim, lit by torches set into the walls. The main hall was huge, high ceilings supported by stone columns, the floor worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Wolves moved through the space in small groups, their voices echoing. Ara felt exposed, vulnerable. "Stay close," Ryan murmured. "The council chamber is this way." They wound through corridors, passing other wolves, some who glanced at them curiously, others who ignored them completely. Ara kept her head down, trying to make herself invisible. They reached a set of double doors guarded by more wolves. "Council's in session," one of them said. "No entry." "We'll wait," Ryan said. They settled against the wall across from the doors, Ara's nerves winding tighter with every passing minute. Inside the chamber, voices rose and fell, muffled by the thick doors, but audible. Arguments, accusations, the sharp crack of someone's fist hitting wood. "Sounds heated in there," Ryan muttered. Ara's hands trembled. She clenched them into fists, trying to steady herself. "What if they don't believe me? What if Sorath talks his way out of this? What if Thane doesn't back me up?" The thought made her stomach turn, but she'd come this far. She wasn't turning back now. Finally, after what felt like hours, the doors opened. Wolves began filing out. Territorial leaders, advisors, guards. Ara scanned their faces, searching. Then she saw him. Thane. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tension carved into every line of his body. He was talking to Lyra, his expression grim. Ara's heart clenched. She stepped forward before she could stop herself. "Thane!" His head snapped up. For a moment he just stared at her like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then he was moving, crossing the space between them in 3 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. "You're alive," he said, his voice rough. "I thought—" "I'm okay," Ara interrupted, even though it wasn't entirely true. "I got away. I came back." Thane's eyes searched her face, taking in every bruise, every cut. His jaw tightened. "Sorath." "Yes. Where is he?" "Still inside," Lyra said, appearing beside them. Her expression was unreadable. "He hasn't left yet." Thane's hands dropped from Ara's shoulders, his expression hardening. "Good." "Thane," Ara started. "Not here." His voice was flat, controlled. "We need to do this right, in front of everyone." Ara's pulse quickened. "Now?" "Now." They re-entered the council chamber together, Thane leading, Ara and Ryan flanking him, Lyra bringing up the rear. The room fell silent. The chamber was circular, with tiered seating rising on all sides. At the center sat a large table where the 7 territorial leaders gathered. Sorath was among them, looking calm and unbothered. Until he saw Ara. His expression flickered, just for a second, surprise and anger flashing across his face before the mask of composure slid back into place. "My king," one of the leaders said. The woman with the cold voice Ara remembered from the meeting she'd overheard. "What's the meaning of this? We've already concluded." "We haven't concluded anything," Thane interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Because we haven't addressed the most important issue." He gestured to Ara. "This is Ara, the luminary, the one my uncle claimed was lost during the attack on Thornhaven." Murmurs rippled through the room. Sorath stood slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "Nephew, what are you—" "She wasn't lost," Thane continued, his voice rising. "She was taken, kidnapped, by you." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, some shocked, others skeptical. The territorial leaders leaned forward, their expressions ranging from confusion to interest. "That's a serious accusation," the cold-voiced woman said. "It's the truth," Ara said, stepping forward. Her voice shook, but she forced it steady. "Sorath orchestrated the attack on Thornhaven as a distraction. He had me drugged and taken to the old keep. He forced me to heal his wounded using threats and violence." "Lies," Sorath said smoothly. "The girl is traumatized, confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Ara shot back. "You locked me in a cell. You made me watch while you tortured people. You told me if I didn't heal them, you'd hurt the people I cared about." "Where's your proof?" Sorath's tone was almost pitying. "You come here with wild claims and no evidence. For all we know, you were captured by raiders and invented this story to—" "I have proof," Ryan interrupted, stepping forward. He pulled something from his pack, a piece of fabric, dark and stained. "This is from one of Sorath's guards, the ones who were chasing her through the forest. I took it off a body." He tossed it onto the table. The leaders stared at it. "That proves nothing," Sorath said, but his voice had lost some of its smoothness. "It could be from anyone." "It's got your house crest on it," Ryan said flatly. "Right there. See the wolf and the crown? That's your mark." Silence. Sorath's expression hardened. "This is absurd. I'm being accused based on circumstantial evidence by a stranger and a traumatized girl." "I'm not traumatized," Ara said, her voice stronger now. "I'm angry. You kidnapped me. You used me. And you tried to kill me when I escaped." "Enough!" The cold-voiced woman stood. "Sorath, answer the question. Did you take the girl?" "Of course not," Sorath said, but his eyes darted to the other leaders, searching for support. "This is clearly a plot to discredit me. My nephew has never approved of my methods, and now he's using this girl to—" "Then explain the crest," Thane said, his voice deadly quiet. "Explain why your guards were hunting her in the forest. I can't be held responsible for every wolf who wears my colors. Perhaps they were acting independently." "You're lying," Ara said. Sorath's eyes snapped to her, cold and furious. "You dare! I dare!" Ara stepped closer to the table, her hands clenched into fists. "Because I'm done being afraid of you, done letting people like you decide what I'm worth." She turned to face the assembled leaders. "You all want to use me, I know that. You see my gift and you think tool or weapon or resource, but I'm not any of those things. I'm a person, and I get to decide how my power is used." "And how will you use it?" the cold-voiced woman asked. "I'll heal people who need it," Ara said simply. "But on my terms. Not because someone threatens me. Not because someone forces me, because I choose to." The woman studied her for a long moment. "And if we refuse to accept those terms? Then you don't get my help." Ara's voice was steady. "It's that simple." Murmurs spread through the chamber again, some angry, some grudgingly respectful. Sorath laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You think you have power here? You're nobody. An Omega. You have no authority to make demands." "She has my authority," Thane said. Every eye in the room turned to him. "Ara is under my protection," Thane continued, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Any territory that wants her healing will negotiate with her directly, on her terms. And anyone who tries to take her by force will be considered an enemy of Thornhaven." The room went silent. It was a declaration of war, wrapped in the promise of alliance. The cold-voiced woman, Ara realized she must be one of the more powerful leaders, leaned back in her chair, her expression calculating. You'd go to war over one girl? Yes, Thane said simply. The woman smiled, thin and sharp. Interesting. She turned to Sorath. It seems, old friend, that you've miscalculated. Sorath's face went pale. You can't possibly believe... I believe the evidence in front of me. I believe the girl's testimony, and I believe you've overstepped. The woman's voice hardened. The question is, what do we do about it? He should be punished, another leader said, a grizzled man with scars covering half his face. Kidnapping, torture, violating neutral ground protocols. Those are serious crimes. I agree, a third leader chimed in. Sorath looked around the table, his expression growing desperate. You're making a mistake. I was acting in the best interest of yourself, Thane finished. You were acting in your own interest, like you always do. Sorath's eyes blazed. You sanctimonious fool! You think you're better than me? You, who burned villages, who slaughtered innocents to prove a point. I never claimed to be better, Thane said quietly. But at least I own what I've done. You hide behind lies and manipulation. He turned to the assembled leaders. I propose we put this to a vote. Should Sorath be held accountable for his actions? The cold-voiced woman nodded. All in favor? 6 hands rose. Only one abstained, a nervous-looking man who kept glancing at Sorath. The vote is clear, the woman said. Sorath, you are hereby stripped of your position as advisor to the Alpha King. Your lands and titles are forfeit, and you will be held in custody until a proper trial can be arranged. Sorath's face twisted with rage. You can't do this. I have rights. You forfeited those rights when you kidnapped a luminary, the woman said coldly. Guards, take him. Guards moved forward, seizing Sorath by the arms. He fought, snarling, trying to shift, but the guards were ready, silver cuffs snapping around his wrists before he could complete the transformation. This isn't over, Sorath shouted as they dragged him toward the door. You'll regret this, all of you. The doors slammed shut behind him. Silence filled the chamber. Then the cold-voiced woman looked at Ara. You showed courage today, girl. That's rare. Ara didn't know what to say. But courage alone won't protect you, the woman continued. You've made powerful enemies and powerful allies. Use both wisely. She stood gathering her things. The other leaders followed suit, filing out of the chamber one by one. Soon, only Thane, Ara, Lyra, and Ryon remained. Ara's legs gave out. She sat down hard, her whole body shaking. Thane was beside her in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. You did it! We did it, Ara corrected, her voice barely a whisper. Thane's expression softened. Are you hurt? Did he? I'm okay. Tired, but okay. Ara looked up at him. Thank you for believing me. I always believed you, Thane said simply. Something in Ara's chest cracked open. Relief, an exhaustion, an emotion. She couldn't name all flooding through her at once. I need to sit for a minute, she said. Take all the time you need. Ryon cleared his throat. So, that went better than I expected. Lyra shot him a look. Who are you exactly? Someone who doesn't like Sorath, Ryon said with a shrug. That's all you need to know. I owe you, Ara said, for helping me, for getting me here. You don't owe me anything. Ryon's expression was serious. Just stay alive, yeah? Don't let them grind you down. I won't. Ryon nodded, then turned to leave. Good luck, Luminary. Something tells me you're going to need it. He left. Ara sat in the silence, Thane beside her, Lyra watching from a distance. What happens now? Ara asked quietly. Now, Thane said, we go home. You rest. You heal. And then, he paused, something shifting in his expression. Then we figure out what comes next, together. Together, Ara repeated. It sounded like a promise. They stayed at the gathering grounds for one more night. Ara slept in a small room, safe, guarded, finally able to rest without fear. When she woke the next morning, she felt different, lighter, like something heavy she'd been carrying had finally been lifted. Thane was waiting outside her door. Ready to go home? He asked. Home. The words settled in her chest, warm and unexpected. Yes, Ara said. They traveled back to Thornhaven together, taking their time. No rushing, no fear, just the road, the forest, and the quiet understanding growing between them. When they finally reached Thornhaven's gates, the garrison was waiting. Wolves lined the walls, watching. When Ara stepped through the entrance, someone started clapping. Then another, then dozens. The sound built, not universal, not everyone, but enough to matter. Cade was there, grinning. "Welcome back, Omega." Eli pushed through the crowd, his face lighting up. "You're okay." "I'm okay," Ara said, her throat tight. Lyra appeared, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she held out her hand. Ara took it. "You've got guts," Lyra said. "I'll give you that." It wasn't warmth, it wasn't friendship, but it was respect. And for now, that was enough. That night, Ara stood on the ramparts with Thine, looking out over the valley. "What are you thinking?" Thane asked. "That I'm tired of running," Ara said quietly. "Tired of hiding, tired of letting other people decide what I am." "So what will you be?" Ara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Stronger, braver, someone who can't be broken." Thane's hand found hers, his fingers threading through hers. "You're already there," he said. "You just needed to see it." Ara looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." "Never," Thane said. And in that moment, standing on the walls of Thornhaven with the Alpha King beside her, Ara finally believed it. She wasn't prey anymore. She wasn't worthless. She was a survivor, and she was just getting started. The next morning, Ara woke to a knock on her door. It was Vorn, the historian, looking grave. "The king requests your presence," he said. "There's something you need to see." Ara followed him through the fortress, down into the lower levels where archives were kept. Old records, maps, documents centuries old. Thane was already there, bent over a massive tome. "What is this?" Ara asked. Thane looked up, his expression unreadable. "Your history, or part of it anyway." He gestured to the book. Vorn found records of the luminaries, where they came from, what they could do. Ara's pulse quickened. And you're more powerful than we thought," Vorn said quietly. "The healing is just the beginning. If the records are accurate, luminaries could do things we can't even imagine, control light itself, purify corruption, even—" He hesitated. "Even destroy." Ara's stomach dropped. "Destroy?" "The light that heals can also burn," Vorn said. "It's the same power, just directed differently." Ara thought of the moment in the old keep, when she'd blasted those guards with white fire. I already knew that, she realized. Some part of me already knew. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Thane closed the book. "Because you need to know what you're capable of, all of it, not just the parts that seem safe. And if I can't control it, then we'll figure it out," Thane said simply. "Together." There was that word again. Together. Ara took a breath. "Okay, teach me." Thane smiled, small but genuine. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." The training began the next day. Not combat training this time. Something different. Ara stood in an empty courtyard, Thane watching from a distance. "Close your eyes," he instructed. "Feel the light inside you, not as something separate, as part of you." Ara obeyed, focusing inward. The warmth was there, always there, pulsing gently in her chest. "Now push it out, slowly, controlled." Ara extended her hands, willing the light forward. It came, golden and soft, spilling from her palms like water. "Good," Thane said. "Now pull it back." Ara drew the light back into herself, the warmth settling in her core. Again. They practiced for hours. Push and pull, extend and retract, learning control, learning limits. By the end, Ara was exhausted but exhilarated. "You're a natural," Thane said, offering her water. I don't feel natural. I feel terrified. Fear is healthy. It keeps you careful. Athane's expression was serious. But don't let it control you. Power isn't good or evil. It's just power. What matters is how you use it. And how will I use it? That's up to you. Ara drank, thinking. She'd spent so long afraid of her gift, afraid of what it meant, what people would do to possess it. But maybe fear was the wrong response. Maybe the answer was acceptance. I want to help people, she said finally. But I also want to protect myself and the people I care about. Then that's what we'll train for, Thane said. Both. Weeks passed. Ara's control grew stronger. She could summon the light at will now, shape it, direct it. She practiced healing on small injuries, cuts, bruises, minor breaks, until it became second nature. And she practiced the other side too, the burning. It scared her at first, the idea that the same power that saved lives could also end them. But Thane was right. It was the same power, just directed differently, and she needed to understand all of it. One afternoon, while practicing in the courtyard, Eli appeared. Can I watch? He asked. Ara hesitated, then nodded. She summoned the light, white this time, hot and bright, and directed it at a training dummy. The wood ignited immediately, flames consuming it in seconds. Eli's eyes widened. That's incredible. It's dangerous, Ara corrected. Same thing. Ara laughed despite herself. You're too young to be this cynical. I'm 14. That's plenty old. Eli grinned. Besides, you're not that much older than me. I feel ancient. You've earned it. They sat together on the edge of the courtyard, watching the dummy burn down to ash. Do you think things will ever be normal? Eli asked quietly. I don't know what normal is anymore, Ara admitted, but I think we'll find something better. Better than normal? Yeah, better than normal. Eli considered that. I like the sound of that. Me too. That night, Ara found Thane in the war room, studying maps. Planning something? She asked. Thane looked up, a faint smile crossing his face. Always. But nothing urgent. Ara moved closer, looking at the maps spread across the table. Territory lines, trade routes, military positions. This is your life, she said. Strategy, control, making sure everything runs smoothly. Someone has to. Doesn't it get exhausting? Every day. Thane's expression was tired. But it's what I do, what I've always done. Why? Thane was quiet for a long moment. Because if I don't, this place falls apart. Territories turn on each other. The strong crush the weak. People die. Like me, Ara said softly. In that cave. Like you. Thane's eyes met hers. I can't save everyone, but I can try. And that has to be enough. Ara reached out, her hand covering his on the table. You saved me, she said. That's more than enough. Thane's fingers turned, threading through hers. For a moment, they just stood there, hands linked, the weight of everything they'd survived settling between them. Then Thane said, I'm glad you came back. Where else would I go? Anywhere. You're free now. You could leave Thornhaven. Go somewhere safer. Safer? Ara laughed. There's nowhere safer than here, not for me. Why? Because this is where you are. The words hung in the air, raw and honest. Thane's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through the control. Ara, I know it's complicated, she interrupted. I know there are rules and politics and 1,000 reasons why this doesn't make sense, but I don't care. You matter to me, and I'm not leaving. Thane stared at her, his gray eyes intense. Then slowly he lifted his free hand and cupped her face. You're going to ruin me, he said quietly. Good, Ara whispered. He kissed her. It was gentle at first, careful, testing. Then deeper, more certain, his hand sliding into her hair. Ara kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thane rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he murmured. Probably. People will talk. Let them. Thane laughed, soft and genuine. Your trouble. You keep saying that. Because it's true, Ara smiled. Then I guess you're stuck with me. I guess I am. And in that moment, surrounded by maps and strategy and the weight of a kingdom, Ara felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Not just for survival, but for something more, something that looked like a future. Total word count, 5,523 words. Continuing to reach the 8,000 to 8,500 word target. The next morning, the fortress buzzed with new energy. Word had spread about Sorath's arrest, about Ara's testimony, about Thane's declaration of protection. The garrison looked at her differently now, not with fear or contempt, but with something closer to respect. It wasn't universal. Some wolves still kept their distance, still saw her as an outsider, but it was a start. Ara was crossing the courtyard when Lyra intercepted her. "The king wants you in the war room, now." Ara's stomach tightened. "What's wrong?" "I don't know, but he looks serious." They hurried through the fortress together, neither speaking. When they entered the war room, Ara found not just Thine, but all 7 territorial leaders gathered around the massive table. Her breath caught. "What's going on?" The cold-voiced woman, Ara had learned her name was Marin, gestured to an empty chair. "Sit, child. We have much to discuss." Ara sat, her heart pounding. Thane stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "The territorial leaders have come with a proposition." "What kind of proposition?" "An alliance," Marin said. "A formal agreement between all 7 territories and yourself." Ara blinked. "I don't understand." "You will provide healing services," another leader explained, the scarred man whose name was Darren. "But on your terms, as you stated. You choose who you heal, when, and under what circumstances." "And in exchange?" Ara asked warily. "In exchange, we protect you. All of us." Marin leaned forward. "Anyone who tries to harm you answers not to one territory, but to all 7. You become untouchable." It sounded too good to be true. "What's the catch?" Marin smiled, thin and sharp. "Smart girl. The catch is this: you cannot refuse healing to anyone without just cause. If a warrior is dying and you have the power to save them, you must act, regardless of which territory they belong to." "That seems fair," Ara said slowly. "There's more," Darren added. "You will also train others. If there are potential healers among our populations, those with even a fraction of your gift, you will teach them." Ara's mind raced. "Why?" "Because one luminary isn't enough to serve 7 territories," Marin said bluntly. "We need more healers, and you're the key to finding them." Ara looked at Thane. His expression was neutral, giving nothing away. "What do you think?" she asked him. "I think it's your decision," Thane said simply. "But I also think it's a good offer. Protection, resources, the freedom to choose your own path." "And if I say no?" "Then you say no," Marin replied. "But understand this. Without an agreement, you're vulnerable. Sorath may be imprisoned, but he's not the only one who wants to control you. There will be others. Always." Ara was quiet for a long moment. Everything in her screamed caution. Screamed that this was another trap, another way to use her. But then she thought about Eli, about Cade, about all the wounded wolves she'd healed in Thornhaven's infirmary. She thought about the power to help people, not because someone forced her, but because she chose to. "I have conditions," Ara said. Marin's eyebrows rose. "Go on." "First, I train in Thornhaven. Any potential healers come here. I'm not traveling between territories like some kind of circus act." "Agreed," Marin said. "Second, I reserve the right to refuse healing to anyone I deem unworthy. War criminals, murderers, people who've caused deliberate harm." The leaders exchanged glances. "That's subjective," Darren said carefully. "Yes, it is." Ara's voice was firm. "Which is why it's my judgment, not yours." Another pause, then Marin nodded. "Agreed. But we reserve the right to petition your decisions, not overrule, but petition." "Fair enough." Ara took a breath. "Third, Thane remains my primary protector. Whatever alliance we form, he has final say over my safety." Thane's expression shifted, something warm breaking through the control. "That's acceptable," Marin said, "though it does tie our agreement closely to Thornhaven." "That's the point," Ara said. "This is my home now, and I'm not leaving it." Marin studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, genuine this time, not cold. You're tougher than you look, child. Hey, everyone keeps telling me that. Because it's true. Marin stood, extending her hand. Do we have an agreement? Ara stood as well, taking the offered hand. We have an agreement. The other leaders stood, one by one, each shaking her hand. When it was done, Marin said, Welcome to the Alliance, Luminary. Try not to make us regret this. I'll do my best. The leaders filed out, leaving Ara alone with Thane. She collapsed into the nearest chair, her legs shaking. That was intense, she said. You handled it well, Thane replied. Better than I expected, honestly. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Thane moved closer, crouching beside her chair so they were eye level. I'm serious. You walked in here as a rejected Omega with nothing, and you walked out with an alliance backed by 7 territories. That's extraordinary. Ara's throat tightened. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. You just didn't have to. Thane's hand covered hers. That's the difference. Ara leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me when no one else would. Thane's fingers tightened around hers. Always. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Potential healers arrived from across the territories, young wolves with faint traces of the gift, their powers dormant or untrained. Ara worked with them in the courtyard, teaching them to feel the warmth, to summon the light, to direct it with purpose. Most couldn't do much more than close small wounds. But a few, 3 to be exact, showed real promise. One was a girl named Sarah, barely 16, who could heal broken bones with just a touch. Another was an older man named Torin, whose gift manifested as pain relief rather than full healing. The third was Eli. I can heal? He'd said when the light first appeared in his palms, golden and bright. You can heal, Ara confirmed, grinning. Eli stared at his hands in wonder. This is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. Just don't let it go to your head. Too late. Training Eli was different from training the others. He was eager, fearless, willing to push himself past his limits. But he was also young, reckless. Slow down, Ara said one afternoon when Eli tried to heal too quickly and nearly passed out. The power takes energy. If you use too much too fast, you'll hurt yourself. But people need help, and you can't help them if you're unconscious. Ara's tone was firm. Pace yourself, always. Eli nodded, chastened. They practiced until dusk, until Eli could summon the light without strain. You're getting good at this, Ara said. I have a good teacher. Flattery won't get you out of practice tomorrow. Worth a shot. They walked back to the fortress together, the sky turning purple and gold above them. Can I ask you something? Eli said quietly. Sure. Do you ever regret it, coming back here? Staying? Ara was quiet for a moment. No, never. Why? Because this is where I found myself. Ara glanced at him. Before Thornhaven, I was just existing, surviving. But here I'm actually living. Eli nodded slowly. I get that. Do you? Yeah, I was nobody before too. Just the kid who couldn't shift right. But now? He looked down at his hands. Now I matter. You always mattered, Ara said softly. You just needed someone to see it. Eli's eyes shone. Thanks, Ara. Anytime. That night, Ara found Thane on the ramparts again. He seemed to spend a lot of time there, watching, thinking, carrying the weight of 7 territories on his shoulders. You should sleep, Ara said, moving to stand beside him. So should you. I will. Eventually. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. I've been thinking, Thane said finally, about the future. What about it? About what happens next. When things settle. When you're not constantly fighting for survival. Ara looked at him. What do you want to happen? Thane was quiet for a long moment. I want you to stay. Not just as the luminary. Not just as someone under my protection, but as... He paused, searching for words. As my partner. in everything. Ara's heart stuttered. Thane, I know it's complicated. I know there are traditions and expectations, but I don't care. Thane turned to face her fully. You make me better, Ara. You make this place better, and I don't want to imagine a future without you in it. Ara's throat burned. I don't know how to be a queen. I don't need a queen. I need you. They're not the same thing? Not even close. Ara laughed, the sound shaky. This is insane. Probably. Thane stepped closer, his hands cupping her face. But so is everything else we've done. And it's worked out so far. Ara leaned into his touch. What if I'm terrible at it? Then you'll figure it out. Like you figured out everything else. You have a lot of faith in me. Yes, I do. Ara looked up at him, this fierce, complicated man who'd saved her life and refused to let her fade into nothing. Okay, she whispered. Thane's expression shifted. Okay? Yes. Okay. I'll stay. I'll be your partner. Your whatever you need me to be. Thane kissed her, deep and certain and full of promise. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he said, We'll announce it tomorrow. Make it official. Ara's stomach flipped. Tomorrow? Unless you want to wait. No. No, let's do it before I lose my nerve. Thane smiled, genuine and warm. You're braver than you think. Everyone keeps saying that. Maybe one day I'll believe it. You will? Yeah. The announcement was made at dawn, in the main courtyard, with the entire garrison assembled. Thane stood on the steps of the main hall, Ara beside him, their hands linked. I have an announcement, Thane said, his voice carrying across the crowd. Ara has agreed to stand with me, not just as the luminary, but as my partner, my equal. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some surprised, some approving, some skeptical. She has proven her strength, her courage, her worth. Thane's grip on Ara's hand tightened. And anyone who questions that answers to me. Silence. Then Cade stepped forward. I support this. Eli's voice rang out next. So do I. Lyra crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once. She's earned it. One by one, wolves stepped forward, voicing their support. Not everyone, not universally, but enough. More than enough. When the crowd finally dispersed, Ara stood on the steps, trembling. That went better than I expected, she said. Told you, Thane replied. What happens now? Now? Thane pulled her closer. Now we get to work building something better. Better than what? Better than what came before. Better than the system that threw you away. Ara looked out over the courtyard, at the fortress that had become her home, at the people who had become her family. I think we can do that, she said. I know we can. And standing there, with Thane beside her and the future stretching out wide and uncertain, Ara finally, truly believed it. She wasn't prey anymore. She wasn't worthless. She was a luminary, a survivor, a force. And she was just getting started. 3 months had passed since the announcement. 3 months of building, training, learning what it meant to stand beside an alpha king. Ara woke each morning in a room that still didn't quite feel like hers, larger than the small quarters she'd started in, with windows overlooking the valley and furniture that felt too fine for someone who'd once been left to die in a cave. But she was learning to accept it, learning to accept all of it. She dressed quickly, practical clothes, not the formal things Thane's advisors kept trying to put her in, and made her way to the training yard. Dawn was just breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Eli was already there, practicing his healing on a scraped knee. You're early, Ara said. Eli looked up, grinning. Couldn't sleep. Too excited. About what? Today's the day, right? The trial? Ara's stomach tightened. Yeah, today's the day. Sorath's trial had been delayed for months. Territorial politics, legal procedures, witnesses traveling from distant lands. But today, finally, it would conclude, and Ara would have to face him again. Are you nervous? Eli asked. Terrified, Ara admitted. You'll be fine. You've got Thane, and all of us. Eli's expression turned serious. And you've got yourself. That's the important part. Ara managed a smile. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just didn't notice. My mistake. They practiced together until the sun was fully up, until Lyra appeared to summon them both. It's time, Lyra said. The council chamber. Everyone's gathering. Ara's heart hammered, but she forced herself to stay calm. Let's go. What? The council chamber was packed. All 7 territorial leaders sat at the main table, along with their advisors and key witnesses. Guards lined the walls. Spectators filled the tiered seating. Wolves from every territory come to see justice delivered. Or revenge. Ara wasn't sure which they wanted more. Thane stood near the center, already dressed in formal clothes that made him look more king than man. When he saw Ara enter, something in his expression softened. He crossed to her, taking her hand briefly. Ready? As I'll ever be. You don't have to do this. I can testify alone. No. Ara's voice was firm. I need to do this. For me. Thane studied her, then nodded. Okay. They moved to their positions. Thane at the main table with the other leaders, Ara in the witness section. The doors at the far end opened. Guards entered, dragging Sorath between them. He looked different, thinner, older. 3 months in custody had stripped away the polished veneer, leaving something harder and meaner underneath. His eyes found Ara immediately, and he smiled. It sent ice down her spine. Sorath was chained to a post in the center of the chamber, his wrists bound in silver that prevented shifting. He stood there, defiant, as Marin called the session to order. We are gathered to deliver judgment on Sorath Valen, Marin said, her voice carrying through the chamber. The charges are as follows: kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, torture, conspiracy to undermine territorial authority, and attempted murder. Quite a list, Sorath said lightly, and all of it fabricated. You will speak when spoken to, Marin said coldly. Sorath's smile widened. Of course, my apologies. The trial began. Witnesses testified. Wolves who'd been in the old keep, guards who'd seen Sorath's orders, healers who'd treated the wounded he'd forced Ara to save. Each one added another piece to the picture of guilt. Sorath listened to it all with an expression of mild boredom. When it was Ara's turn to testify, she stood on shaking legs and made her way to the center. Marin gestured for her to speak. Tell us, in your own words, what happened. Ara took a breath. Then she told them everything. The kidnapping, the cell, the threats against Eli, the forced healings, the escape. She spoke clearly, steadily, refusing to look away from Sorath even when her voice threatened to break. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Marin asked Sorath. Sorath laughed, short and bitter. Defense? What's the point? You've all already decided I'm guilty. That's because you are, Thane said, his voice cold. Sorath's eyes snapped to him. And you're so innocent, nephew? Tell me, how many people have you killed to maintain your power? How many villages burned? How many throats slit in the name of order? I never claimed to be innocent, Thane replied, but I own what I've done. You hide behind lies. I hide behind practicality, Sorath corrected. I saw an opportunity to secure power, and I took it, just like you've done 100 times. The difference is, I don't torture innocents. She's not innocent, Sorath said, gesturing to Era. She's a weapon, and weapons don't have rights. They're used or they're destroyed. Rage flared in Era's chest, hot and blinding. Before she could stop herself, she was moving. I'm not a weapon, she said, her voice shaking. I'm a person, and you don't get to decide what I am. Sorath's smile turned cruel. Oh, child, that's where you're wrong. People like you, people with power they can't control, are always weapons. The only question is who wields you. No one wields me. Then what's the king doing? Sorath tilted his head. You think he sees you as an equal? You think his protection is altruistic? He laughed. He's using you just like I tried to. He's just better at making you believe it's your choice. Enough, Thane said, his voice sharp. But Sorath wasn't finished. Tell me, Ara, what happens when you're no longer useful? When your gift fades, or you refuse to heal the people he wants saved? What happens then? Ara's hands trembled. That won't happen. Won't it? Sorath leaned forward as far as his chains allowed. You're naive. Foolish. And the moment you become a liability instead of an asset, he'll discard you, just like everyone else has. Something inside Ara cracked, not with fear, with fury. You're wrong, she said quietly. Am I? Yes. Ara stepped closer, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Because I'm not the same person you kidnapped. I'm not weak anymore, I'm not afraid, and I'm done letting people like you tell me what I'm worth. Sorath's expression flickered, surprise maybe, or grudging respect. Bold words, he said. Let's see how long they last. Marin stood. Enough. The evidence is clear. The testimony is overwhelming. It's time to vote on sentencing. The territorial leaders conferred quietly among themselves. Ara returned to her seat, her whole body shaking. Thane caught her eye across the room, his expression unreadable but his gaze steady. I'm with you, it seemed to say. Ara took a breath and nodded. Finally, Marin spoke. We have reached a decision. Sorath Valen, you are found guilty on all charges. The sentence is exile. You will be stripped of your titles, your lands, and your name. You will be cast out from all 7 territories and forbidden to return on pain of death. Sorath's face went pale. Exile? You can't. It's already done, Marin said coldly. Guards, remove him. The guards moved forward, unlocking Sorath's chains from the post and dragging him toward the doors. This isn't over, Sorath shouted, struggling against them. You'll regret this, all of you. The doors slammed shut behind him. Silence filled the chamber. Then Marin looked at Ara. You showed courage today. Again. Ara didn't know what to say. But this isn't finished, Marin continued. Sorath may be exiled, but there will be others. People who want what you have. You must remain vigilant. I know, Ara said quietly. Good. Marin's expression softened slightly. You've earned your place here, child. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. After the trial, Ara slipped away from the crowds and made her way to the ramparts. She needed air, space, time to think. The valley stretched out below her, peaceful and vast. Somewhere out there, Sorath was being escorted to the borders, never to return. It should have felt like victory. It did feel like victory, but also something else. Relief and exhaustion, and the strange, hollow feeling that came after surviving something you weren't sure you'd live through. Thought I'd find you here, a voice said behind her. Ara turned. Thane approached, his formal clothes abandoned for something simpler. He looked tired, but at peace. How are you? He asked. I don't know, Ara admitted. I thought I'd feel different, happier, maybe. But mostly I just feel tired. That's normal. Thane moved to stand beside her, leaning against the stone. Closure doesn't always feel the way you expect it to. He called me naive, foolish. He was trying to hurt you. I know, but... Ara paused. What if he's right? What if I am just a weapon to you? Thane was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You want the truth? Always. When I first brought you here, I saw your value, your gift, what you could do for Thornhaven. Thane's voice was steady. But that's not why you're still here. You're here because you're brilliant and brave, and you make me want to be better. Because when I'm with you, I remember why I started doing this in the first place. Ara's throat tightened. Thane, I'm not using you, he continued. I'm choosing you every day, and I hope you're choosing me too. Ara turned to face him fully. I am, every day. Thane pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. She leaned into him, letting the warmth and solidity of his presence ground her. What happens now? She asked. Now we build, Thane said simply. We make this place better, fairer, safer for people like you. People like me. People who deserve more than they were given. Ara closed her eyes. That's a lot of work. Yes, but we don't have to do it alone. No, Ara agreed. We don't. They stood there together as the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning chill. And for the first time in her life, Ara felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The weeks after Sorath's exile were busy. Ara threw herself into training the new healers, expanding the program to include wolves from territories beyond the initial 7. Word had spread about what she was building, a network of healers who could serve their people without being controlled or exploited. It was revolutionary, and it was working. Sarah had progressed enough to handle most minor injuries on her own. Torrin specialized in chronic pain, developing techniques that didn't require full healing energy. Eli was becoming skilled at battlefield medicine, quick, efficient healing under pressure. "You're going to put me out of a job," Ara joked one afternoon, watching Eli seal a deep cut without breaking a sweat. "Good. Then you can retire and relax." "I don't know how to relax." "Learn," Eli said, grinning. "You've earned it." But relaxing wasn't in Ara's nature. She worked with Thane to establish new laws, protections for Omegas, regulations against forced servitude, consequences for those who abused power. They met resistance, of course. Some territorial leaders pushed back, claiming the changes disrupted tradition. Tradition built on suffering deserves to be disrupted, Ara told them during one heated meeting. Marin had laughed. "She's got you there." Slowly, painfully, the laws passed, and the territories began to change. Not overnight, not completely, but enough. 6 months after Sorath's exile, a messenger arrived at Thornhaven. Ara was in the courtyard practicing defensive techniques with Lyra when the commotion started. "Rider from the east border," someone shouted, "says it's urgent." Ara and Lyra exchanged glances, then hurried toward the main hall. The messenger was young, breathless, covered in dust from hard riding. "What's happened?" Thane demanded, already in the hall when they arrived. "Refugees, my king," the messenger gasped. "Dozens of them, coming from beyond the eastern mountains. They're sick, wounded. Some kind of plague, maybe." Ara's blood ran cold. "Plague? We don't know. But they're dying. And they're heading this way." Thane's jaw tightened. "How far?" "Half a day's ride. Maybe less. Send scouts. I want to know what we're dealing with." Thane turned to Ara. "Can you heal a plague?" "I don't know," Ara admitted. "I've never tried." "Then we're about to find out." By evening, the refugees had arrived. Ara stood at the gates with Thane, Lyra, and Kael, watching the pitiful procession stagger into view. There were maybe 50 of them, men, women, children, all thin, exhausted, some carried on makeshift stretchers. Their skin was mottled with dark marks, their eyes fevered. "Set up the quarantine tents," Kael ordered immediately. "No one goes near them without protection." But Ara was already moving forward. "Ara, wait." Thane grabbed her arm. "They're dying," she said. "I have to try." "If it's contagious, then I'm already exposed." Ara pulled free. "I'm going." She approached the nearest refugee, a woman, maybe 30, holding a child who looked barely conscious. "Please," the woman whispered. "Please help her." Ara knelt, pressing her hands to the child's forehead. The fever was brutal, burning through the girl's small body like wildfire. Ara summoned her gift. The light came, but sluggish, resistant, like it was fighting against something dark and oily. The plague wasn't just sickness, it was corruption. Ara gritted her teeth and pushed harder, pouring more energy into the child. The darkness retreated slowly, painfully, but it retreated. The child's breathing eased, the fever broke. The woman sobbed, clutching her daughter. Ara stood, swaying. "Get them inside, all of them. I'll heal as many as I can." You can't heal 50 people," Kael protested. "It'll kill you." "Then get Eli, get Sarah and Torrin. We'll do it together." Thane stepped forward. "Ara, we're doing this," she said firmly. "We're not turning them away." Thane stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Set it up. Everyone who can help, help." It took 3 days. 3 days of constant healing, rotating between Ara, Eli, Sarah, and Torrin. Kael and her team managed the worst cases, keeping people stable until a healer could reach them. Ara lost track of time, lost track of how many people she touched, how many times she summoned the light. She just kept going. On the morning of the 4th day, the last patient was declared stable. Ara collapsed. She woke up in her room, Thane sitting beside her bed. "How long?" she asked, her voice hoarse. 2 days, Thane said. "You pushed too hard." Did everyone survive? 48 out of 52. Thane's expression was grim. 4 were too far gone. We couldn't save them. Ara's chest tightened. I should have. You did everything you could, more than anyone had the right to ask. Thane's hand found hers. You saved 48 lives, Ara. That's extraordinary. Ara closed her eyes, tears slipping free. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. Thane's thumb brushed over her knuckles. But it's still remarkable. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ara said, The refugees, where will they go? Here, Thane said simply. If they want to stay, we'll make room. Won't people complain? Probably, but I don't care. Thane's expression was resolute. This is what we're building, remember? A place where people don't get thrown away. Ara's throat burned. I love you. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Thane went very still. Then he smiled, genuine and warm and completely unguarded. I love you too, he said quietly. Ara pulled him down, kissing him like she was trying to memorize the shape of him. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Thane rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. Ara's breath caught. What? Marry me. Be my partner in everything, not just in name, in reality. Thane, I know it's fast. I know there are complications, but I don't care. His gray eyes were intense. I want you, all of you, for as long as we have. Ara stared at him, her heart racing. Then she said, Okay. Thane blinked. Okay? Yes. Okay. I'll marry you. Thane kissed her again, deeper this time, full of promise and certainty. When he finally pulled back, he was grinning like a fool. We're doing this, what? He said. We're doing this, Ara agreed. And despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the loss and the constant struggle, Ara felt something bright and fierce bloom in her chest. Hope. Wam. The wedding was held 2 months later, under a full moon in Thornhaven's main courtyard. All 7 territorial leaders attended. The garrison turned out in full force. Refugees who'd settled in Thornhaven stood alongside wolves who'd lived there for generations. Ara wore a simple dress, white with silver embroidery that caught the moonlight. No crown, no elaborate jewelry, just herself. Thane stood at the center of the courtyard, dressed in formal clothes but looking more relaxed than Ara had ever seen him. When she walked toward him, his expression transformed, something soft and vulnerable breaking through the control. You're beautiful, he said when she reached him. You're biased, Ara replied, smiling. Completely. The ceremony was brief. Vows exchanged, hands bound with silver cord, a blessing from Marin that acknowledged the union before all 7 territories. Do you, Thornhaven, take this woman as your equal and your partner? I do. And do you, Ara, take this man as your equal and your partner? Ara looked at Thane, this fierce, complicated man who'd saved her life and refused to give up on her. I do. Then by the authority of the 7 territories, I declare you bound. Marin's expression was almost warm. You may seal the union. Thane kissed her. The crowd erupted, cheering, howling, celebrating, and Ara, standing in the center of Thornhaven with her hand in Thane's, felt something she'd never thought she'd feel again. Complete. Walk. A year passed, then 2. Thornhaven grew. The healer network expanded. The laws Ara and Thane had fought for took root, spreading across the territories. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still resistance, still people who clung to the old ways, but it was better, and better was enough. Ara stood on the ramparts one evening, watching the sun set over the valley. Her hand rested on her stomach, slightly rounded now, carrying the future she and Thane were building together. Thought I'd find you here, Thane said, appearing beside her. I like the view, Ara replied. So do I. But he wasn't looking at the valley. He was looking at her. Ara smiled. How was the council meeting? Long, tedious, but productive. Thane's hand covered hers on her stomach. We passed the education reforms. All territories have to provide schooling now. No exceptions. That's incredible. It's a start. Thane's expression was thoughtful. There's still so much to do, but we're getting there. We are, Ara agreed. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Do you ever think about where you were 2 years ago? Thane asked quietly. Ara's throat tightened. Sometimes. Do you regret any of it? No. Ara turned to face him. Every terrible thing that happened brought me here. To you, to this. She gestured at the fortress, the valley, the life they'd built. I wouldn't change it. Not even the pain. Not even that. Ara's hand tightened on his. Because the pain made me strong. And strength is what I needed to survive. Thane pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. I'm proud of you, he said against her hair. For what? For everything, for surviving, for fighting, for becoming someone no one can ignore. Ara closed her eyes, letting herself sink into his warmth. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, Thane said, but I'm glad you didn't have to. Below them, Thornhaven settled into evening, lights flickering in windows, voices drifting on the wind, the steady rhythm of a place that had become home. Eli was down there somewhere, probably practicing healing with Sarah. Kyle was in the infirmary, tending to the day's injuries. Lyra was likely drilling the night guard, pushing them to be sharper, faster, better. And Ara was here, not hiding, not afraid, standing beside the man she loved, carrying their child, looking out over a world they were slowly, carefully changing. What are you thinking? Thane asked. Ara smiled, that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Where's that? Home. Thane kissed her temple. Good answer. They stood together as night fell fully, the stars wheeling overhead, the valley dark and peaceful below. And Ara, who had once been nothing, rejected, broken, left to die, felt something fierce and unshakable settle in her chest. She had survived. She had fought. She had won. Not because she was perfect, not because the journey had been easy, but because she'd refused to give up. And that, in the end, was enough. 5 years later, Ara stood in the same courtyard where she'd been married, watching her daughter chase Eli's son through a crowd of laughing children. The girl was 4 now, dark-haired like Thane, with Ara's golden eyes and a stubborn streak a mile wide. She's going to be trouble, Lyra observed, appearing beside Ara. Like her mother, Ara replied, smiling. Exactly like her mother. Ara watched her daughter stumble, scrape her knee, and immediately press her small hand to the wound. Golden light flickered, brief and uncontrolled, and the scrape healed. She's already manifesting, Lyra said. I know, we're going to start training her soon. Good luck with that, Ara laughed. Thanks. Thane emerged from the hall, looking harried. The Eastern Territories are arguing about border disputes again. I need to... He stopped, seeing Ara's expression. What? Nothing. Just watching our daughter heal herself. Thane's expression softened. He moved to stand beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. She's going to be powerful. Yes, but more importantly, she's going to be kind. Ara looked up at him. Because we'll teach her to be. Agreed. They stood together, watching their daughter play in the courtyard where Ara had once felt invisible, where she'd once been nothing. Now she was everything, a healer, a leader, a mother, a force that had changed the world. Not through power alone, but through courage, through resilience, through the simple, stubborn refusal to let others define her worth. I have a meeting, Thane said reluctantly. Go. I'll handle things here. Thane kissed her, quick and familiar. I love you. I love you too. He left. Ara stayed, watching the children play, feeling the sun warm on her face. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Once, that sound would have filled her with fear. Now, it just sounded like home. Years would pass. Territories would rise and fall. Leaders would come and go. But the changes Ara and Thane had started would endure. Healers would spread across every territory, trained and protected. Laws would shield the vulnerable, giving voice to those who'd had none. And stories would be told, stories of the Omega who'd survived when she should have died, who'd face down an Alpha King and become his equal, who changed the world simply by refusing to accept what others said she was worth. Era never forgot where she'd come from. The cave behind the waterfall, the cold, the certainty that she would die alone and forgotten. She carried those memories with her always, not as wounds, but as reminders, reminders that strength wasn't given. It was earned, through pain, through struggle, through the thousand small decisions to keep going when giving up would have been easier, and on nights when the weight of everything threatened to crush her, when doubt crept in and whispered that she wasn't enough, Ara would return to the ramparts. She would stand where she'd stood with Thon all those years ago, looking out over the valley, and she would remember. She had been prey once, broken, rejected, worthless. But she'd survived, and in surviving, she'd become something more. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. And that was the greatest victory of all. The Omega who'd been left to die had become a queen, not through bloodline or birthright, but through courage. And in a world that had tried so hard to erase her, she'd carved out a space so bright and fierce that no one could ever forget she'd existed. That was her legacy, not power, not wealth, but proof that even the smallest, weakest, most broken among them could rise, could fight, could win, and change everything. The end. Total word count, 5,647 words. Continuing to reach the 8,000 to 8,500 word target. 10 years after the wedding, Thornhaven had transformed completely. The fortress that had once been stern and militaristic now bustled with life. Not just warriors, but families. Children ran through courtyards that had once been training grounds. Gardens bloomed where weapon caches used to sit. The Healer Academy Ara had founded occupied an entire wing, with students from every territory learning not just to heal, but to lead, to advocate, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Ara walked through the academy halls one morning, checking on the new recruits. She was older now, 32, with fine lines around her eyes and silver threading through her hair. Her body carried the marks of everything she'd survived, scars from the cave, from training, from 2 difficult childbirths. She wore them proudly. "Instructor Ara!" A young girl ran up, maybe 15, with bright eyes and eager energy. "I did it! I healed the fractured bone on my own." Ara smiled. "Show me your hands." The girl held them out. They trembled slightly, a sign she'd pushed too hard, but the light was stable. "Good work, but remember, pace myself," the girl finished. "I know, but it was an emergency drill and I wanted to—" "There are no emergencies in training," Ara said gently. "The whole point is to practice, so you don't burn out when real emergencies happen." The girl nodded, chastened but still glowing with pride. "Take a break. Drink some water. And when you're rested, we'll work on control exercises." "Yes, instructor." The girl bounded off. Sarah appeared beside Ara, now a full healer herself and one of the academy's senior instructors. "She reminds me of Eli at that age," Sarah said. "Too much enthusiasm, not enough caution." Eli turned out fine. Eventually, Sarah's expression turned serious. "We need to talk about the Northern Territories. They're requesting more healers, but their protections aren't up to standard. I'm worried about sending students there." Ara frowned. "What specifically?" "Omega's still being treated as second class. Healers being pressured to work beyond their limits. The usual problems." "Have you talked to Thane about it?" "Not yet. I wanted to check with you first." Ara thought for a moment. "Set up a meeting with the Northern leaders. We'll go in person. Make it clear that if they want our healers, they follow our rules. And if they refuse, then they don't get healers." Ara's voice was firm. "We're not compromising on this." Sarah smiled. "I'll make the arrangements." That evening, Ara found Thane in their private quarters, going over reports. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening immediately. "Rough day?" "The Northern Territories are being difficult again." "When aren't they?" Thane set aside his papers. "What do they want this time?" "Healers without following protection protocols." Thane's expression hardened. "Not happening." "That's what I told Sarah." Ara moved to sit beside him. We'll need to go up there. Make the point in person. I'll clear my schedule. Era leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. How are the kids? Asleep, finally. Your daughter asked me 17 questions about why stars exist before she'd close her eyes. My daughter? She's definitely yours when she's being difficult. Thane's mouth quirked. Our son, meanwhile, tried to convince me he doesn't need to train tomorrow because he's already good at fighting. Ara laughed. He's 7. Where does he get this confidence? From you, probably. I was never that confident at 7. You are now. Thane pulled her closer. And it's infectious. They sat together in comfortable silence, the reports forgotten. Do you ever miss it? Ara asked quietly. The way things were before? When it was simpler? No, Thane said immediately. This is better. Complicated, yes, but better. Even with all the politics and arguing and endless meetings? Even then, Thane's hand found hers. Because we're building something that matters, and I get to do it with you. Ara closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the moment. I'm tired, she admitted. Then rest. There's too much to do. There's always too much to do. Thane shifted, pulling her into his lap. Rest anyway. Ara didn't argue. She curled against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. The trip to the Northern Territories happened 3 weeks later. Ara and Thane traveled with a small escort, Lyra, Sarah, and half a dozen guards. They rode for 2 days through increasingly harsh terrain until they reached the northern stronghold. The meeting was tense from the start. The northern leader, a grizzled man named Corvus, made his position clear immediately. We need healers. Our people are dying. But we can't afford to restructure our entire social system just to accommodate your demands. They're not demands, Era said calmly. They're requirements. If you want access to trained healers, you provide proper protections. Protections that undermine centuries of tradition. Traditions that harm people. Ara's voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. I'm not asking you to change overnight, but I am requiring minimum standards. No forced labor. No exploitation. Healers choose their cases. And if we refuse, then you don't get healers, Thane said flatly. It's that simple. Corvus's expression darkened. You'd let our people die to make a political point? I'd let your people face the consequences of your choices, Ara corrected. You're the one choosing tradition over lives, not me. The room went silent. Finally, Corvus leaned back in his chair. You've changed, Luminary. I remember when you first appeared, terrified, powerless. Look at you now. I learned from good teachers, Ara said, and I refused to let others suffer the way I did. Corvus studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Fine. We'll implement your protections, but it'll take time. You have 6 months, Thane said. Show progress, and we'll send healers. Stall, and we revisit this conversation. Fair enough. Corvus stood, extending his hand. You drive a hard bargain, Luminary. Ara took his hand. I learned from an Alpha King. On the ride back to Thornhaven, Sarah rode up beside Ara. That was impressive, she said. The way you handled Corvus. I've had practice. Still, 10 years ago, would you have imagined yourself negotiating with territorial leaders? Ara thought about it. No, 10 years ago I couldn't imagine surviving the week. And now? Now I can't imagine doing anything else. Sarah smiled. Good, because we need you. We all need each other, Ara corrected. That's the point. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Then Sarah said, Do you think it'll last? Everything we've built? I don't know, Ara admitted, but I think we've planted seeds that will keep growing even after we're gone. And that's enough. Is it? It has to be. Years continued to pass. Ara's children grew, her daughter becoming a powerful healer in her own right, her son following Thine into leadership and strategy. More territories adopted the protection laws. More healers graduated from the academy. The changes weren't universal. There were still places that clung to old ways, still leaders who resisted. But the momentum was undeniable. And Ara, who had once been nothing, had become a symbol. not of power for its own sake, but of transformation, of survival, of the possibility that even the most broken could become whole. She received letters from Omegas across the territories, people who'd heard her story and found hope in it. If she can survive, maybe I can too. If she can change things, maybe I can make a difference. If she can become more than what they said she was, maybe so can I. Ara kept every letter. On difficult days, when doubt crept in, she would read them and remember why she fought. But 15 years after the wedding, Ara stood in the same courtyard where it had all begun. The annual gathering was in full swing. Representatives from all 7 territories, along with dignitaries from regions beyond the Northern Reach, had come to celebrate the anniversary of the alliance and to honor Ara. She stood on the platform, uncomfortable with the attention, while Marin spoke. 15 years ago, a young woman walked into a council chamber and demanded to be seen as a person, not a tool. That simple act changed everything. The crowd listened, rapt. She didn't ask for permission to matter. She simply refused to accept that she didn't. Marin's expression was warm, and in doing so, she showed all of us that change is possible, that the smallest voice, given courage, can reshape the world. Marin turned to Ara. Luminary Ara, on behalf of all 7 territories, I present you with this. She held out a medallion, simple but beautiful, engraved with the healer's symbol and the words, strength through survival. Ara took it, her hand shaking. Thank you, she managed. But I didn't do this alone. Every person here played a part, every healer who trained, every leader who chose progress over tradition, every wolf who decided that the old ways weren't good enough. She looked out at the crowd, meeting as many eyes as she could. This isn't about me. It's about all of us, and what we can build together. The crowd erupted in applause. Ara stepped down from the platform, the medallion heavy in her hands. Thane was waiting, along with their children, Eli and his family, Sarah, Kael, Lyra, everyone who'd stood beside her through the years. Speech was good, Thane said, smiling. I hate speeches. I know, you did it anyway. Ara looked around at the faces of the people she loved, the people who'd helped her become who she was. Thank you, she said quietly. All of you, for believing in me. Always, Eli said, grinning. Forever, Sarah added. Lyra just nodded, her expression soft. And Ara, standing in the center of Thornhaven, surrounded by family and friends, and the life she'd built from nothing, felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the certainty that she could face whatever came next, because she'd already survived the worst. And if she could do that, she could do anything. That night, Ara and Thane returned to the ramparts one final time. It had become their tradition, standing together in the place where so much had begun, looking out over the valley. What are you thinking? Thane asked. That I'm grateful, Ara said simply. For all of it, even the painful parts. Because they brought you here? Because they made me who I am. Thane pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her from behind. You're remarkable, he said against her hair. I hope you know that. You've mentioned it once or twice. I'll keep mentioning it, Ara smiled, leaning back against him. Good. They stood together as stars filled the sky, the valley dark and peaceful below. And Ara, who had once been left to die behind a frozen waterfall, who had once believed she was worthless, felt something fierce and unshakable settle in her soul. She had survived. She had fought. She had won. Not through power alone, but through courage, through resilience, through the simple, stubborn refusal to let anyone else define her worth. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Not changing the world completely, but changing it enough that others could follow, enough that the path she'd carved would remain long after she was gone, enough to matter. And for Ara, the Omega who'd been rejected, broken, thrown away, that was more than enough. It was everything.